Okay, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well this afternoon. Wherever you are, welcome to A Dude's Talking, episode 46. And with me, who will be joining me in a few minutes, is a great friend of the show, Greg McCarron from the Antedote YouTube channel and the Antedote podcast. So please, if you can, please go like, share, and subscribe and watch The Antidote with Jeremy Rothkushel and Greg McCarron. They both do excellent work. I've been following them for quite a long time now. And today, Greg and I are going to discuss the Council for National Policy. And we're going to discuss its history. We're going to discuss where it came from. We're going to discuss what it's been involved with in the past 40 years. And we're going to discuss why the CNP is as important as understanding the Council for National Policy as important as just knowing about and learning about and keeping track of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council for National Policy. The Council for National Policy represents the right nationalistic. Not really nationalistic, fascist side of the world order, where the CFR is part of the more of the liberal left side of the world order. Let me turn off my air conditioner. Just turned off. Apologize. Sorry, I forgot to turn it off, you guys. So, I'm gonna play a couple of clips from a good friend of mine, Josh Reeves, during the show from his Secret Right Volume 1 and Secret Right Volume 2 movies. Please go buy them, purchase them, watch them if you want to learn about the Council for National Policy. They're excellent past resources, and Josh has done a lot of excellent work exposing the Council for National Policy. So I'm going to play the membership list right here before I bring Greg on. And we're going to see some people who are in the CNP. So why don't we start? What the? Did VLC player crash for me? That's weird. Yeah, it did. Alright, let me restart it. Okay, guys. So, you saw some of those people on there. I'm sorry, I have no idea why VLC player crashed on me. It's definitely weird when the first time it's ever happened on my computer. There it goes. Restarted the list. Sorry about that. Alan Keyes, Jerome Corsi, John McCain and John Hagee, Pat Robertson, Jack Abramoff, Eric Prince, Chuck Missler, of course, Knight of Malta, Pat Buchanan, Paul Craig Roberts, Josh calls him Pruneface, Clarence Thomas, Rush Limbaugh, Tom Clancy, Louis Lehrman, John K. Singlaub, Tom DeLay, Grover Norquist, Bob Barr, James Dobson, Jerry Falwell, Jack McLam, Sarah Palin, Stanley Monteith, George W. Bush, Richard DeVos, Reverend Sung Myung Moon, Tim LaHaye, Mitt Romney, Michelle Bachmann, Nelson Bunker Hunt, Howard Phillips, Larry Burke, Richard Vergary, Jesse Helms, Cliff Kincaid, Gary Bauer, Pat Robinson. I don't know what's up with my video. Paul Wyrick, Jack Kemp, Alberto Gonzalez, Dick Armey, Frank Gaffney and John Bolton, Gary North, Stephen Harper, Rod Parsley, Dr. Michael Kaufman, Rudy Giuliani, Pierre DuPont, H. Ross Perot, J. Peter Grace, Bob Jones III, Dick Cheney. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong. Dr. Edward Tell, I don't know what's wrong with the pictures. Lieutenant General Gordon Summer, Mike Huckabee, Donald Rumsfeld, Mark Sanford, John Ashcroft, the Coors family, Phyllis Schlafly, Richard Millen Scafey, Steve Forbes. All right. So, now not all of those people are in the Council for National Policy that I've seen, but all of them, are either were members or have spoken to the CNP. I will, give Josh credit on that. Some of them, like I think Stephen Harper, for example, the former Prime Minister from Canada. Well, he just spoke to the CNP, to my knowledge. Same with George W. Bush. But yeah, it's very interesting that's a list, and we're going to get into my presentation from Shoot the Moon, and I'm doing another more encompassing presentation on the Council for National Policy that will be done hopefully in the next month or so. That's really going to break it down a little bit more, give you more information, the things that have not been said, that you guys might find it interesting on the CNP. Going to be a little bit more comprehensive, the speech that I gave at Shoot the Moon. I'm trying to get to the part after Jeff Gannon to set up how a little bit of thing about Morton Blackwell and why Morton Blackwell is definitely not anybody connected to Morton Blackwell. Morton Blackwell is a problem within the Council for National Policy. So I'm going to go to the chat for a minute to see what's happening. How's everybody doing out there in the chat? Hope you guys are doing well. I see Lee Veltman, good friend of the show. Boneless Rocker, good to see you, buddy. Free to Captives, how you doing? Good friend of the channel. Suzanne, of course. Suzanne's a dear personal friend. It's good to see everybody here on this Sunday. So, we're going to break down the beginning of the Council for National Policy, how it's founded, what it has been involved in over the past 40 years. And Greg and I are going to discuss why we think that it is worth knowing about and understanding. And hopefully I eventually will have Josh Reeves on the stream one day to discuss more about the Council for National Policy. And discover a little more about what's a little more of his research with the CNP and everything, and that'll be good. So it'd be good to have Josh on to talk about him, being one of the ground researchers for it when he found out about the Council for National Policy from Peter Dell Scott, one of Josh's early radio shows, talked to him about it. So I'm going to get Greg in here. We're going to start. Greg, of course, from the Antedote. But yeah, it'd be good to have Josh in here. It'd be good to get him in here. And be good to get his, what Josh gave up, exposing the CNP. And how, he could have sold out and not, expose them, but he continued with it. So Skype's giving me problems, as it always does. Hopefully Greg will call me back in a minute. So it's interesting when you put all the dominoes in place of what the CNP was involved in, whether it's Iran-Contra, whether it was the phony impeachment of Bill Clinton, whether it was the Mariana Islands sex trade with Jack Abramoff, whether it's 9/11, whether it's funding Al-Qaeda through Grover Norquist and the Altinqua Bank. The CNP is a very strong part of the world order and is more secretive. You can go look on the Council on Foreign Relations website and see who... Okay, Greg's calling me now. Hey, Greg, we're on. How you doing? This is Greg McCarron from the Antedote. How you doing, brother? No, you sound perfect on my end. So I was just playing a little bit of the previous list that Josh Reeves had about the Council for National Policy on a Secret Right Volume 1 of members, and I don't think all of them were members. I think some of them were just speakers, like the former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper. But everyone, at least in his list, has either spoken to the CNP or was a member of the CNP. So when did you first learn about the Council for National Policy, Greg? I don't think I've ever asked you when you first came across them.
Just within the last few years, I would say that I didn't really have an understanding of like what we call this secret right, certainly during the 2016 election. But I started down this path by listening to some audios that Nick Spiro, who's now deceased, had done regarding the whole Roy Cohn network and World Anti-Communist League, John Birch Society, all of that, and then I eventually, at some point in 2017, I watched the first of the two Secret Right documentaries that Josh Reeves made. Then I eventually got around to watching the second one, which got a lot more into depth with certain connections to the Kennedy assassination. And from there, I've gradually learned more and more about how this organization, ties together so many of these major players within this conservative movement, because you start to wonder how these people all relate to each other, and these people who ostensibly have such different goals all relate to each other, and how they could. And I think the question really needs to be asked to people: how all these different entities, interests, organizations, think tanks that have all these ostensibly different goals can all coalesce and rally around certain issues, particularly in 2016, rallying around a particular individual to become the president of the United States. And you see that this is not something new. This was the missing piece of the puzzle in a lot of ways, I think, as far as like understanding power politics and the elites or the globalists or whatever term you want to use to describe those in positions of power. And these entities have had immense influence for decades, even before the Council for National Policy. But CNP really, I think, coalesced so many of these varying interests on the quote-unquote right into one big club. Or I guess in the case of actually related to us, as George Carlin said, it's a small club and we're not in it. But so it's just been over the last few years I've learned about it, and I've been able to connect the dots with all these varying people and interests I see shilling for Donald Trump or for other assorted issues, all interrelated with each other. And you see that there is a common network that either directly or indirectly through other people, that through other connections, bring these people together.
Very much so. Greg, I 100% agree with you on that. And mine was, as a friend of mine during the Trump election sent me The Secret Right to watch, where he found out about Josh Reeves. I guess someone had posted on 4chan or 8chan, and then he sent it to me, and I was like, "Oh, this is bullcrap! I would have already known about this by now. Alex Jones would have told me. I would have already heard about the CNP, And then, like I've told many times, I voted for Trump, and then he started filling the cabinet, and I was like, man, I know these people from somewhere. Like, I was racking my brain. I was like, man, I know them. And then it hit me. I was like, these are CMP members, And then so I went back and watched the movies, and I was like, oh man. And that's when it started. That's when I started to realize, I still had a little bit of hope for Trump afterwards, but that's when I started to see more clearly, and it was like, oh yeah.
And
Okay.
as you like to call her, the queen bee of the queen bee of the Craig B. Spence parties, Phyllis Schlafly, the last major thing she did before she passed away was endorse Trump.
Yeah, which makes 100%, And of course, Sniff in the chat says today's CMP is tomorrow's CFR, and it goes on and on and on. Yeah, it does, Sniff. Yeah, that's why you always have to continue exposing these secretive organizations, because once you expose them and they allow it to become more open, and they move on to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. That's why you got to keep, you got to move on. You can't stay back. There's people who are still exposing the CFR. Not to say that these modern operations should not be exposed.
And go ahead.
But you got to keep on. You got to, the CMP is still very secretive at this point, and they'll eventually move on to something else, and they'll kick the can, and then when they do that, you and I, and among others, will follow that, and keep exposing where they're going.
And you can't always have the same figureheads front and center. Like now, you're starting to see the new generation. I guess it would be people like Charlie Kirk and people like that are kind of representing this next generation that's going to take the mantle of leadership within the same old network. It may be under a different name, but the same network with the same goals. It'll just be under different faces, because you always have to evolve with the times. I guess you can't just have the same, as we see now, one of their Pied Pipers, Limbaugh, he could be on borrowed time at this point. So you have to move on and evolve and bring newer and younger, fresher faces into the picture.
Yes, or you have to move from different organizations because too much is found out about one, and that happens quite frequently. And it's like Steph said, it's all Mystery Babylon, and he's right about that. So I want to play a little bit from Josh Reeves' documentary on Morton Blackwell, Greg, and I want to get your opinion on it, okay?
Go for it.
What the? Now it's not working for me. All right, hold on. Go ahead, say something for a minute, because now it's not playing on my end. I'm having sound problems. Do you know much about Morton Blackwell, Greg?
I really don't. I know he's the head of an organization called the Leadership Institute. Seems to be a very key organization in doing what it says. The name and the title, leadership, creating a new generation of conservative leaders. It's very interesting. Mike Pence cites Morton Blackwell as one of his mentors.
Which doesn't surprise me in the slightest bit.
Yeah, but then you take that, and in the speech Rand Paul, you played of Rand Paul speaking to the Council for National Policy, I believe he was introduced by Morton Blackwell, and then he proceeds to sing Blackwell's praises.
And how much the Pauls love Morton Blackwell, yes. How much, not just Rand, sure. Rand is taught about his dad too, okay? And so I guess some people will say, well, that doesn't come from the horse's mouth. Well, I mean, father and son, it's not... I've never seen, Ron completely disown his son as a failure,
But even in the case of, like, Rand Paul, I mean, even if Ron Paul wasn't involved, which he is, I mean, it should just demonstrate to you that, we're supposed to believe that, like, Rand Paul and Mike Pence have these, goals that aren't really in line with each other, yet they all seem to, praise the same people.
Yes. Yeah, they all seem to pat the same people on the back. They all seem to praise the same people. And they all seem to like a certain country over there in Eurasia. What would that country be? Greg, what would that certain country be that they all seem to like?
A little more overt in the case of Rand Paul, a little more obvious and open. But with Mike Pence, when you see like the bigger, cover-up going on in terms of the actual, depth of who Donald Trump is and what got him. And also the fact that Mike Pence was brought in by Paul Manafort into the Trump campaign. Paul Manafort being very much a very primary front and center focal, very closely connected to these international Russian Soviet-based strain of global organized crime oligarchical syndicate. You see that, I mean, in Rand Paul's case, it's more overt, but also when you look deeper into Donald Trump outside of just this media narrative that's just trying to get people into this hysterical mindset where nothing actually gets revealed and you just create a cartoonish Bond villain out of the Russians. You see a deeper picture, and you see that Mike Pence is, in a serious way at some level, Pence and people around him are also very connected to this same particular Eurasian landmass and a lot of the very powerful interests there.
Yeah, very much so. All right, Greg, I hate to do this to you, but I'm not going to be able to play it on your end because for some reason VLC will not allow it magically to play through my speakers anymore. So I'll be able to play it on uh, for everybody else to see it. Like I don't want to now, but I promised I would. So if you got the YouTube video link up, I can send you. You can hear it from there. If you got a chance to play it, I'm sorry, I do not know why.
Put you on mute and listen to it.
I don't know why. I am so sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
But I'll go ahead and play a little bit back so you can go ahead and do that to catch up with it. Okay.
Now that Gannon sent McCall a card when the White House press secretary got married and was given a coveted invite to the White House's exclusive Christmas party, an event which, according to several White House correspondents, signifies that the White House believes the journalist is in good standing with the Washington establishment. More recent revelation suggests that the degrees of separation between Jeff Gannon, James Guckert, and Karl Rove is precisely one. Council for National Policy member Morton C. Blackwell, Rove's mentor and Gannon's teacher at the conservative quack factory, the Leadership Institute. In 1979, Blackwell founded the Leadership Institute, which has been devoted for over 25 years to turning out right-wing activists and journalists. Karl Rove is its best-known graduate. Blackwell ran the Youth for Reagan effort in 1980, served on Ronald Reagan's White House staff, and has been a Republican National Committee man from Virginia. He's a close associate of the ultra-reactionary Paul Weyrich, and was Blackwell, Weyrich, and Vigry who met with Jerry Falwell in 1979 to found the Moral Majority. In 1991, Blackwell became executive director of the Council for National Policy. Morton Blackwell appears to share many of Weyrich's elitist views and wrote a foreword to Pelino del Correa del Oliver's book, Nobility and Analogous Traditional Elites, in which he said, quote, "One does not have to accept papal infallibility to appreciate a case persuasively made, using theological, moral, and prudential arguments. This book will convince many readers, whatever their faith, that good elites are legitimate, desirable, and yes, necessary."
The good elites are necessary, okay? The dominionists, the ones that will hold power over us, they are necessary, according to Morton Blackwell. The CNP is necessary to save us from the globalists because they are the white hats, they are the good elites. Trust the plan. Trump's the God Emperor. That's literally what Blackwell could be saying with that. It's very interesting. It's very interesting that he says that. Greg, did you get a chance to listen to it?
Yes, and it's very interesting that Blackwell's, I guess, his most famous or his most prominent student was Karl Rove. And I mean, and you think about, and it's very all, and that I think is very all-encompassing because, you know, Karl Rove is supposed to represent the GOP quote-unquote establishment as the, you know, the elements within the GOP who are supposed to be holding down whatever the party line is that isn't so comfortable with someone like Donald Trump. But at the same time, I mean, Karl Rove, I mean, he was Bush's brain, as they put it. I mean, he was a lead, obviously a very leading strategist in terms of the 2000 Bush election. He was also up to his eyeballs in the 2004 chicanery that went on in the state of Ohio, along with
John Kenneth Blackwell.
Yes, along with Ken Blackwell, who should be much more infamous than he is. But then you also look at who Rove was coming up with in the Young Republicans, and I was actually reading from a book about Karl Rove, Boss Rove, at the library the other day, and it gets into the people he came up with in the GOP as a Young Republican. It was Lee Atwater and Roger Stone. And so they were very, came out of this Nixonian circle of the GOP in the 70s, and I believe Stone and forgetting the exact circumstance, I believe Stone and Rove actually competed to see who the head of the college Republicans would be, and then it ultimately ended up with Karl Rove heading the Young Republican, or the Reagan Young Republicans group, as was mentioned in that video there. And Rove and Stone give, at least publicly, the image of like being adversarial to each other. But you can see, though, it's a slightly maybe different strain with Rove playing the quote-unquote more establishment kind of operative. But you can see where the interconnections go, and they all play off of each other, given the dual roles of Karl Rove in 2004 with election chicanery, and then Roger Stone in 2000, Broward County, Miami, Brooks Brothers riot, whatever shenanigans went on with the Supreme Court in 2000. So you see where there's a coming together here, and it's obviously an individual such as Morton Blackwell, along with this other Blackwell, Mr. Ken Blackwell, should be much more notorious than he is.
Oh God, yes. I mean, with what happened with Connell and everything, which Rove and Blackwell have both been implicated in. And so, yeah. So let's get a little bit on what Josh Reeves had to say about good old Ron Paul next.
But I am more concerned with the fact that they have connection after connection to people that are the conspirators. That's what we've got to be bringing to the forefront.
Ron Paul is a John Birch Society supporter and the only presidential candidate to get a perfect rating from the group. Paul is connected to many individuals that are Jesuits, Knights of Malta, John Birch Society, and Freemasons. Ron Paul still addresses the John Birch Society and has other political connections to it. When asked about this by the New York Times, Dr. Paul said, "Oh my goodness, the John Birch Society. Is that bad? I have a lot of friends in the John Birch Society. They're generally well educated and they understand the Constitution. I don't know how many positions they would have that I don't agree with because they're real strict constitutionalists and they don't like war. They're hard money people." Congressman Paul also has many associates in the CMP, including Grover Norquist, who spoke at Paul's rally for the Republic. He also has had affiliations with white nationalists like Bill White, who said in a letter, quote, "Comrades, I have kept quiet about the Ron Paul campaign for a while because I didn't see any need to say anything that would cause any trouble. However, reading the latest release from his campaign spokesman, I am compelled to tell the truth about Ron Paul's extensive involvement in white nationalism. Both Congressman Paul and his aides regularly meet with members of the Stormfront Set, American Renaissance, the Institute for Historic Review, and others at the Tara Thai restaurant in Arlington, Virginia, usually on Wednesdays. This is part of a dinner that was originally organized by Pat Buchanan, Sam Francis, and Joe Sobron, and has since been mostly taken over by the Council of Conservative Citizens. I've attended these dinners, seen Paul and his aides there, and been invited to his offices in Washington to discuss policy. For his spokesman to call white racialism a small ideology and claim white activists are wasting their money trying to influence Paul is ridiculous. Paul is a white nationalist of the Stormfront type who has always kept his racial views and his views about world Judaism quiet because of his political position. I don't know that it is necessarily good for Paul to expose this. However, he really is someone with extensive ties to white nationalism, and for him to deny that in the belief he will be more respectable by denying it is outrageous. And I hate seeing people in the press who denounce racialism merely because they think it is not fashionable. Bill White, Commander, American National Socialist Workers Party. Paul seems to be in the closet on his white nationalist views, much in the same way he is in the closet on the 9/11 issue. There is also speculation that Nazi SS officer Oswald Pohl, executed during the Nuremberg trials, may in fact be a direct relative of Ron Paul. This has yet to be 100% verified, but the resemblance is uncanny. And the death certificate of Ron Paul's grandfather, Caspar Pohl, shows that the Pohls came from Germany and changed their name to Paul upon immigrating to the United States. Ron Paul co-authored a book called The Case for Gold with admitted Zionist and Knight of Malta Louis Lehrman. Lou Lehrman is co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, a Contra supporter, and a signatory of the Project for a New American Century documents, which Alex Jones and his 9/11 Truth Parrots champion as the smoking gun of 9/11 evidence. Lehrman was also an investor in Arbusto Oil with Bush and the Bin Ladens. Lehrman is another NWO insider who has a membership in both the Council for National Policy and the Council on Foreign Relations. With Paul's association with Alex Jones and Lou Lehrman, this brings the number of Alex Jones connections to Iran-Contra and the people involved in it to a staggering level. Ron Paul also gives speeches at many Jesuit universities, including Loyola and Georgetown. Please research Ron Paul's connection to the secret right on your own. There is more than we can fit in this film. One of the most damning pieces of info about Ron Paul, in my opinion, are his constant use of obvious Masonic hand grips, combined with the fact that his wife is a member of the Order of the Eastern Star, a female Masonic organization open to wives and daughters of Freemasons. While it is possible Carol Paul could be an Order of the Eastern Star because her father was a Mason, my research has shown that there are no known examples of any current Eastern Star members who became members because of their fathers. It is almost always because their husband is in fact a Freemason. Ron Paul, above all else, is a career politician with establishment connections that is 100% aiding in the operations we have discussed in the Secret Right films. It is finally time that we become the leaders and to stop allowing ourselves to be led by phony leaders who appear to be populist representatives, but are in fact there to make sure no real grassroots people's revolution ever takes place. This is important to understand in the case of Ron Paul and Alex Jones and the entire secret right itself.
Big jump. Golly, you guys went with the red and the purple and maroon tonight. Aggies are still out there playing.
Get batteries in your mic.
Oh, sure. You go ahead and do that. Okay, all right.
I'll say Mr. Dingrich.
Good enough.
I've attended the smoking gun of the council connection. Smoking gun of 9/11 evidence. Lerman was also an investor.
Let's see that Masonic grip one more time. One more time. Let's see that Masonic grip one more time. Ron Paul's Masonic grip.
Membership in both the Council for National Policy and the Council on Foreign Relations. With Paul's association with Alex Jones and Lou Lerman, this brings the number of Alex Jones connections to Iran-Contra and the people involved in it to a staggering level. Ron Paul also gives speeches at many Jesuit universities, including Loyola and Georgetown. Please research Ron Paul's connection to the secret right on your own. There is more than we could fit in this film. One of the most damning pieces of info about Ron Paul, in my opinion, are his constant use of obvious Masonic hand grips, combined with the fact that his wife is a member of the Order of the Eastern Star, a female Masonic organization open to wives and daughters of Freemasons. While it is possible Carol Paul could be
down with the leader, he always has
amazing.
The like the
my
pyramid
research has
and
shown that there are no known examples.
I've always noticed that. It just so a couple of interesting things here about Ron Paul. I'll say it when I'm done with the that I've noticed from this clip. I'll say it when we're done playing it.
In the Secret Right films. It is finally time that we become the leaders and to stop allowing ourselves to be led by phony leaders who appear to be populist representatives, but are in fact there to make sure no real grassroots people's revolution ever takes place. This is important to understand in the case of Ron Paul and Alex Jones and the entire secret right itself.
Big jump. Golly,
All right, get ready. Get ready. Look, that's a normal handshake, and pull them in.
Aggies are still out there playing.
Get batteries in your mic.
Oh, sure. You go ahead and do that. Okay, all right.
I'll say Mr. Dingrich.
Good enough. You're ready to go. I'm great. How are you?
To address was Congressman.
So the doctor after that episode, the doc leaned over. Well, the doc leaned over. He said, that's happened to everybody. He said, most of us just haven't done it in front of 4 million people. He did. He does.
I tell people, I was trying to make them feel better.
Oh, wow.
That was funny stuff you did last night.
It's kind of like it's life, man. Go live it. So, tonight. Aggies are tonight. Aggies are tonight. Aggies are tonight. Aggies are tonight. Aggies are.
Buddy.
In closing, one final person I would like to address was Congressman Ralph Paul of Texas, who is a Freemason and a Council for National Policy.
I've done, Ron Paul. I've done more shows than Ron Paul. He definitely is a big connect to the CMP.
The thing for me with Ron Paul is, I think I said this before when I've done a stream with you before. Ron Paul to me was like the person who kind of led me to getting into a lot of this stuff, listening to Ron Paul and his various presidential campaigns, and he'll always have that little place, I guess, in my heart for that reason. But the more and more as time goes on, even though Ron Paul, in some ways, it's not as obvious with him, because if you just he's very he's very gentlemanly, he's very
personable, very personable.
Yes, he's very
seems
personable.
like Grandpa.
Although when he was younger, you saw he had a lot of fire in his belly when he was younger. If you ever saw his Morton Downey Jr. clip, which I must admit was pretty entertaining, him on the Morton Downey Jr. show arguing with his audience. But now he has that And Ron Paul, in a lot of ways, even the way he expresses his rhetoric as far as like foreign policy and getting out of wars, it sounds a lot better than a lot of other people who you will hear within that milieu and within those circles. It does, but you can see if you really, I think, take a closer look at his rhetoric and the nature of some of the quote unquote isolationist things he says, even saying things like, this is one of my first red flags with Ron Paul, was the idea that, wow, why should the U.S. have any say in where Israel's capital is? If the Israelis want their capital to be in Jerusalem, what right does the U.S. have to say that they can't? And see, the problem with that is that completely just what the problem with that to me is that you say that, and yeah, that sounds good, but you're completely omitting the obvious, very serious influence, the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby has over our society, has over our politicians, to the point to where that is something that the U.S. does play a direct role in. Even if Ron Paul is pushing this idea that, well, the Americans shouldn't tell, the U.S. going to be involved regardless because of the significant role of the Zionist lobby and how a lot of Ron Paul's friends within the Council for National Policy are very much pushing this particular evangelical, pro-Israel, pro-end times agenda. And so things like that, it's going to be involving the U.S. So it's nice for him to say that, but it's completely, it becomes a problem when you see just the influence there and how it really works. Ron Paul's pipe dream of just the U.S. staying out of it and letting Israel dictate its own affairs, that ain't going to happen with all these people that he's in these circles running with. Their influence has anything to say about it.
Yeah, trying to, like, using Left Behind, like Tim LaHaye, that tried to prime the evangelical Christians and many of the CMPers being part of the evangelical movement in the 80s and the 90s, and pushing for their version of the end times, similar to when Julian the Apostate tried to rebuild the Third Temple. The Roman emperor. So it's kind of like that, kind of prime the mind for, okay, so this happened, instead of the book of Revelation, instead of, when this happens, this is, it's very interesting that they use it in that regard.
And then Rand Paul went to visit the wall. He did the pilgrimage, it seems, that any major American, Republican, or in a lot of cases Democrat politicians make. He made his due diligence pilgrimage to the wall, put on the yarmulke and touched the wall and prayed at the Western Wall. And then he comes out with all this talk about cutting foreign aid to all these countries, but never mentions Israel.
Of course not. So this is the start of my presentation. I got the good old picture of Vice President Pence, who's addressed the CMP every year, even though they are the Vice President of the United States is addressing them, even though, according to Jay Dyer, they're not as important as the CFR is currently, and they're, just a bunch of Cold War conservatives, and they don't really do anything. Okay? So, Mike Pence has addressed them every year since he has been Vice President, and this is from his tweet on May the 19th, 2017. Join the Council for National Policy leaders in the conservative movement who, with the President of the United States, are renewing the conservative vision in our time. Very interesting thing about that, CFNP.org releases some of the speeches, but not always of every group meeting that they had. Just like they did not release 2016 Donald Trump's address to the CMP, they did not release Mike Pence's addresses to the Council for National Policy. It's very interesting.
Yes, very interesting indeed. And one more note on Ron Paul. It mentioned the white nationalists, the whole Council for Conservative Citizens, and that whole some of those groups, the paleocons, you could call them. And Ron Paul, the father, kind of almost perfectly straddles a fence between like very overt, like racially oriented paleocons, the types of people who are mentioned, that whole conservative Council for Conservative Citizens, Sam Francis, Pat Buchanan milieu, but also the actual Ayn Rand, laissez-faire, libertarian, live and let live, anything goes economic mentality.
Or even social policy with the libertarians, yes, for the most part.
Yeah, but Ron Paul straddles, it seems to be a good figure to kind of straddle both sides of that fence, so to speak. And then one more thing with member Council for Conservative Citizens, Tony Perkins, the head of the Family Research Council, who once, according to Max Blumenthal, and I find this to be very believable, back in The Nation magazine in 2005, posted that Tony Perkins paid David Duke $80,000 for his membership list, as they were, yes, both in Louisiana. At this point, Tony Perkins was still a rising political figure. Tony Perkins went on to speak to the Council of Conservative Citizens in 2001. And then one final note on Ron Paul and the white nationalists. I was thinking about this because I sent you some audios of a man Dave Emery and some audios he's done over the years regarding the neo-Nazi movement. And he's very leftist. I mean, he kind of literally sees a Nazi under every rock, which I don't know if I see that exactly, but he ties a lot of the modern right-wing movement to remnants of what we saw of the World War II era fascism, both America First with the Regnerys and people like Charles Lindbergh, and then also to the actual German elements of the German power structure in World War II. And Dave Emery had mentioned that Ron Paul, among other politicians, along with John Connolly, was given an update on what was called Operation Red Dog, which was this plot that David Duke was basically one of the heads of, as far as financially putting together the money for it, to invade and overthrow the government of this small Latin American Caribbean country, Dominica. And in some ways, this set the stage for Reagan's '83 invasion of Grenada, which was said to be fighting those commies. And Don Black was David Duke's heir as the KKK leader, and he was also involved in this Red Dog plot. And it turned out there was a story back in early 2008 of Ron Paul was under fire because Don Black had donated to his campaign, and Ron Paul made this public statement where he said that, well, I'm not going to be returning the money because his words, he was going to be doing, they would do worse things with that money than anything I would do with it. So, it's interesting. Ron Paul publicly rebuked it, but at the same time, there seems to be a connection if you go back to this whole Red Dog era, and Ron Paul basically giving a green light to this paramilitary ragtag attempt to overthrow this republic that Don Black and just happened to be involved in. So,
yeah, that's extremely interesting, Greg. And I've posted that they're still collating that list and selling them through Council for National Policy member. What's his name? He runs the Response Unlimited. I can't think of his name offhand. Philip Sedantes. So yeah, I mean, they're still doing that to this day. That doesn't surprise me at all. So to give a little bit of background on the CNP, the Council for National Policy is a secretive group like the Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg both used to be. You can see their membership lists online now and who attend meetings. You can see the CFR membership list online. There's many reports of who attends meetings at Bilderberg. Are the foremost right-wing activists and funders within the United States. CNP member Morton Blackwell has said the policy of the CNP is that we don't discuss who attends the meetings or what is said. Its membership meetings and projects are all secret. Even though the group enjoys tax-exempt status, it focuses on foreign policy issues. Interesting, because the name of the group is the Council for National Policy. Not international policy, national policy. Even though they do talk about foreign policy issues, but they also talk about stuff domestically too as well. The CNP's membership roster dates, locations of meetings, meeting speakers. Some of their speeches and speakers are posted on the CNP website, and meeting agendas are kept secret. However, more information has leaked over the past years, giving us a glimpse into the inner workings of the group. Okay, just to send a basic groundwork, a narrative of what the CNP is. Okay, and here's some of the listings of the links that we've gotten of the breakdown of the CNP action, and you have Morton Blackwell there, and Thomas Fitton of Judicial Watch, and Phyllis Schlafly. And you have the executive community with Stuart Upperson being the president of the CNP back in 2014.
Salem Radio, right?
Yep, John Kenneth Blackwell, Morton C. Blackwell being members of the executive committee. Kellyanne Conway, who's part of the Trump administration. Phyllis Schlafly. So yeah, it's very interesting. And then, you get into more, we'll discuss some more people that are a part of it. But, some people say, well, John, everybody thought the CNP was just a conservative group. Don't worry about it. Many people who joined didn't understand nefarious actions of how the group truly is. And I will say there's some compartmentalization that goes in the CNP, like all organizations. I doubt Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, is really up to some nefarious scheme on the rise of like Iran-Contra, like Oliver North being in the CNP, okay? But that being said, though, however, you still have to make note that I'm pretty sure there's certain people like Charles Koch, Nelson Bunker Hunt, these people are definitely up to Joseph Kors, John K. Singlaub. These people are definitely up to nefarious Oliver North within the Council for National Policy. Would you agree with me on that, Greg?
Yes, definitely. I mean, in a lot of ways, that is, a very the names you mentioned, like John Singlaub within the military, very, very hidden hands. Once again, people who should be much more notorious than they are. I mean, John Singlaub, there's a long-term history there that it would be hard to go into just in the context of this, but in just the context of this conversation. But Singlaub up to his eyeballs, up to his neck in the Iran-Contra, and he's been a player long before that. There are some very good, well-documented exposés of Singlaub that we could post perhaps in links and provide people sources of. But needless to say, that's definitely, the people who are in the higher ranks of organizations like this are definitely, I would say, in the know, as opposed to a possible maybe, good person, well-believing, well-meaning person like Mike Lindell of MyPillow, who nonetheless, I mean, is used to promote their narratives, the evangelicalism and also the economic pick yourself up from the bootstraps. You can do it because I did. I was just a down and out drug addict, and I found God, and I found prosperity, and so it's. But at the very least, people like that are being used by people in high positions.
Or the activist mommy blogger. I really doubt that she's as nefarious as some of these people. So I'm not saying
never know at the same time.
Oh, true,
true.
But I'm saying it's like, the CMP, like, not everyone is going to... Usually, you have to use the words of... You have to use how Fight Club is. If people talk about... if people are willing to talk about the CMP, they're probably not very high up in the CMP, like Herman Cain, for example.
That's
okay,
true,
well, stop running his mouth about it. But if you don't talk about the CMP, you're probably very high up of it if you're in it, and the workings of the group.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree with you about Mike Lindell from MyPillow, but I think your point definitely stands there with regards to those in positions of power and influence as opposed to those who aren't. And I would also throw out there that not everybody who is involved in certain things or even appears on certain programs and associates with certain people, not everyone involved is always an agent. I mean, I think for agents and assets, I think that it's nice and beneficial to their cause to have some well-meaning people around them to promote that cause.
Useless, useless dopes,
Yeah,
idiots.
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, I mean, I don't think everybody who's ever been on the Alex Jones show, for example, is an agent or operative, but they've been used.
Yes.
And the same goes for like Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity using Mike Lindell. He might be a good guy, he might be a true believer, but he's being used by them.
Yeah, so let's go a little bit in the foundation of the Council for National Policy. I actually got more information in this on my updated stream, our updated PowerPoint presentation I'm going to do for a stream. But the Council for National Policy was founded in 1981. We only know a few of the early founding members that attended the CNP's first meeting at Richard Viguerie's home, which was made up of more than 50 people. The founding members that we know include Tim LaHaye, Beverly LaHaye, Richard Viguerie, Paul Wyrick, T. Cullen Davis, Herbert and Nelson Bunker Hunt, Charles Koch, William Size, Howard Phillips, David Stockman, who was former director of the Office of Management and Budget for the Reagan administration, Lewis Woody Jenkins, Morton C.
Went on to be a
Blackwell.
Ron Paul supporter, I believe, David Stockwell.
Yes, Robert Billings, Joseph Kors, Ed Foldner, Reed Larson, Ed McTeer, Bill Sarcino, Phyllis Schlafly, John K. Singlaub, Robert Waring Stoddard, and former Senator from North Carolina, John Pease. Now, we know from whistleblower Charlotte Iserby that the Rockefellers, just like they helped to fund the Council on Foreign Relations, also helped to fund the Council for National Policy.
And also there was Rockefeller money involved in John Birch Society and Robert Welch as well.
Yes, there was, from the purchasing of the candy factory from Welch. Supposedly. We don't 100% concrete on that. That source comes from good old Eustace Mullins, who's a John Bircher himself. And Josh Reeves put a little bit more credence on it, and so maybe, but the Birchers adamantly deny that. But I'm saying it's likely seems right because I'm just saying it's it's not a.
And I mean, you could even look at the rhetoric of the John Birch Society. You could say what you will about maybe what Robert Welch was, some of the things, some of the conclusions he might have been starting to come to, looking at it as just bigger than a struggle between America and communism later on in his life.
Yes.
But I mean, the very early days of the John Birch Society, I mean, look at the type of rhetoric that was being pushed. I mean, Eisenhower is this communist, and in a fluoridation of the water is going to lead to degenerate integrating of the races. I mean, who does that benefit? I would say it benefits people like the Rockefellers, that kind of rhetoric being out there.
Oh, very much so. That's why they funded the top of the pyramid funded to both sides of the pyramid. So the CNP was said to hope they will gain influence much as they believe liberals have through such organizations as the Council on Foreign Relations. I believe the CNP has gained as much influence as the CFR, if not more, Woody Jenkins once said to the press. I predict one day before the end of the century, the CNP will be so influential that no president, regardless of party or philosophy, will be able to ignore us and our concerns or shut us out of the highest levels of government. Yeah, Dyer, Jay, I think that came true there, bud. Just me. But, so the Council for National Policy, and if you could think of anything else, let me know, Greg, about this. But they were directly involved in the Iran-Contra affair, the funding of the Afghanistan freedom fighters during the 1980s, the impeachment of the phony impeachment of Bill Clinton, should I write there.
Yeah. That was basically the vast right-wing conspiracy that Hillary Clinton was referring to.
Yeah, I got about that in here.
Everybody's, maybe the only, possibly one of the very few honest statements that she's ever made.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Right-wing conspiracy against her husband. Although now I'm starting to, and I'll get into this more and more, I think, in a program with on my channel at some point with my co-host Jeremy, the reevaluating the whole Clinton-Trump relationship in the various operatives, and there's some interesting things there that make me think it's not all that it appears to be, that rivalry. But I mean, Clinton, on its face, that was an honest statement. There's a vast right-wing conspiracy out to get my husband, and she was referring basically to the Council for National Policy and all of the varying tentacles of this octopus, so to speak.
Yes, very much so. So they were also involved in the election of George H.W. Bush, the election and re-election of George W. Bush, the Republican nomination of John McCain, and the election of Donald Trump. It's highly likely that the CNP was involved in the Franklin scandal, 9/11, the modern United States wars in the Middle East, like the funding of the Al-Qaeda by the Al-Tiqwa Bank through Grover Norquist. Of course, we know Al-Qaeda. And it seems to be, and the Taliban both seem to be propped up too by our own military side too as well. Have kind of put forth a false enemy, and the Q conspiracy, and the CNP was involved with and is involved with the Unification Church, the Knights of Malta, Zionists and white nationalists. Very interesting. The Zionists and white nationalists would sit at the same table at a meeting and make strange bedfellows, and Scientology. And so, yes, and there's more to that, and I'll get to that in the future presentation. I've uncovered the CNP has been involved with, like the Mariana Islands sex trade and labor scandal. And so, yeah, there's definitely more that the CNP has been involved with too as well. And then, so what does the CNP state are its goals, and what does the group stand for? Is there anything else that you think the CNP was involved with?
Well, I think we can. There's a few things that CNP. You could probably elaborate. We could definitely elaborate on all of those various projects that you discussed. But you're definitely right. With the Clintons, it was obviously the impeachment of Clinton and leading that effort as far as going back to 1994, and it was Jerry Falwell and the Clinton Chronicles and all of that led to the types of conspiracies that are out about the Clintons now. A lot of it accurate, but also a lot of it very exaggerated, I would say. We've gone from, well, there's a Clinton, the Clintons might have murdered some people, to Hillary Clinton's literally, sacrificing children, drinking baby's blood and all that. I mean, that's all an outgrowth of like the Council for National Policy, those types of theories. But CNP was key in the whole Newt Gingrich, quote, Republican Revolution contract with America that gave kind of a false hope, kind of a precursor to the Tea Party back in the early to mid 90s. And then moving on to Bush, Council for National Policy, with the varying inroads into the some quote-unquote anti-interventionist, quote-unquote isolationist types, but also very Zionist, evangelical, war on terror hawks, was a seemed to be a crucial meeting point of during the Iraq War, as well as the Council for National Policy. And there's a good New York Times article back in 2004 about the Council for National Policy meetings and things that would go on there. And the Council for National Policy during this time received a briefing from Dan Senner, who was the chief spokesman for the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq. And he's since come out to be like a never Trump neocon, but I would say that's a pretty significant person to have come in and give a briefing to the all-powerful Council for National Policy about how the war efforts go.
Or Olive North giving briefings and begging for Iran-Contra funds.
Yes.
Or Lieutenant General Boykin, the Knight of Malta, or Michael Flynn, giving briefings when he was in the Obama administration. You know, it's all smoke and freaking mirrors. And so this was a letter from Woody Jenkins to Bill Casey, CI director, to try to get him to come to the CMP meeting on February 22nd to 23rd, 1985 at Rancho Los Palmos, Rancho Mirage, California. So he talks about how purposes of the council. The Council for National Policy is a nonprofit, tax-exempt educational foundation organized in accordance with Section 51C3 of the Internal Revenue Code. The council is composed of America's key national and regional leaders who share a belief in the free enterprise system, the need for a strong national defense, and the desire for a moral rebirth in America. It includes established leaders from all walks of life and all sections of the country, as well as young men and women who have potential to accomplish great things in the future. We do not support or oppose candidates, lobby for or against legislation, or make public statements on issues. Rather, our purpose is to make sure the leaders have access to the best information available on national world problems, know one another on a personal basis, and collaborate in achieving their shared goals. President Reagan said in a meeting on our last annual message to our last annual meeting, "Few people have more power than the members of the Council for National Policy to influence the future course of our nation." Dyer, Reagan said, to me it seems like CFR's got all the power, Jay. That's what you tell me. Globalists have all the power, but I don't know, man. To me, it sounds like my pit, Jay, that Reagan's saying it, and all these powerful people that Council for National Policy and all these people have been around with. I'm pretty sure the CMP has a lot of power. Cancel meetings are closed to the media and to the general public. We do not announce to the media or when or where we meet, nor do we inform the media as to who takes part in our programs, either before or after a meeting. The remarks of the speaker of the council meetings are quote-unquote off the record and not for repetition outside of our meetings, except for special permission. Similarly, our membership list is considered confidential and is not revealed to anyone outside of the council. What do you got to say all that, Greg? Sounds very secretive to me.
And what stays in the there used to be that T-shirt. I saw a funny T-shirt one time, a Scooby-Doo shirt. What happens in the Mystery Machine stays in the Mystery Machine. So I guess what happens in the CNP ballrooms stays in the CNP ballrooms.
Yeah, definitely.
In dinner clubs and $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, who knows how many $1,000 a plate dinners, I guess, with elite CNP members. Whatever happens stays in there. I guess whatever happens on the premises is supposed to stay on the premises. As you said, if you're a nobody, then you might talk about it. But if you're in the know and you know what's going on, then you're not going to say anything. Never talk about Fight Club. So.
No, and I've read Oliver North to the speech to the Council for National Policy about Iran-Contra and begging for funds and everything like that and everything. And if you don't think that they weren't, Reagan was even getting some of his intelligence briefings per the Reagan Library from the Council for National Policy meetings themselves. So, Reagan was the President of the United States is getting briefings from speeches in the CMP about the Iran-Contra affair. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know, then I'm sorry.
What's interesting with Reagan was that people were too, that was one of the reasons with Reagan was that people were really worried about Bush's influence on a Reagan presidency. Oh, he'd bring in all the Council on Foreign Relations and all the trilateral people into his administration. But I could also tell you that once Reagan got elected, okay, maybe he brought some of those people in. He was also bringing in an awful lot of people who fit into this CNP Council for National Policy milieu that even back then, within various more conspiratorial circles, much less now, was getting zero attention, while all the attention is on, how many trilaterals are going to be brought into the Reagan administration. Meanwhile, this whole, I would say a lot of the bigger agendas of the Reagan administration were not shaped so much by that contingent of the puzzle, so to speak, but it was by this other aspect. And you talk about Bush as being like a CFR and Council for National Policy guy. Well, I would say Bush, with his central role in Iran-Contra and what was going on with all of that, shows that he very much definitely had the connections into that Council for National Policy milieu.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, so I'm going to read the Iran-Contra part and we'll discuss it, okay? Because you're very knowledgeable in Iran-Contra. Greg, and so am I. So, all right, so there are numerous connections to the CNP that was directly involved in the Iran-Contra affair. Former CNP staff member Ron Akers said Stedman Fagoth, who once led Mosquito Indian factions fighting the Sandinistas along the Honduran border, spoke at the CNP meeting at the Camelback Inn in Scottsdale, Arizona. Stedman Fagoth said his Contra group, Missouri, received 2 tons of FOA supplies for his army in July of 1984. Fagoth also told a reporter... Wait, did I skip ahead on it? Okay. Told a reporter that FOA... food, medicine, and clothing has allowed his Contra troops to concentrate on the war against the Sandinistas. Aker is Woody Jenkins' brother-in-law and was his administrative assistant when Jenkins was the CNP executive director. Aker was also involved with Jenkins through another organization, Friends of America. So that's where the FOA is. Jenkins had said Friends of the Americas supplies only humanitarian assistance to refugees near the border between Honduras and Nicaragua. In 1985, while U.S. aid to Nicaraguan Contra rebels was banned, CNP member Oliver North was even a member of the CNP into the late 1990s after the Iran-Contra affair, ordered CNP member Louis Tams, while he was United States ambassador to Costa Rica, to use his post to help the rebels open a military front in Nicaragua. Finally, Tams acted as Friends of America's Christmas Box County chairman, while he was the Costa Rican ambassador. Friends of America is committed to the Contra cause. Fundraising letters talk about Nicaraguan atrocities while embracing the Contra as freedom fighters. Its clinic in Los Trejos, only 100 yards from the Nicaraguan border, is described by FOA as being the only United States presence along the strategic Honduran-Nicaraguan border on the fringe of the Soviet Empire. Key Contra leaders also identify CAUSA, associated with Reverend Sungmun Moon's Unification Church, and FOA as principal sources of their supplies in 1984. Food distributed to the refugees in exchange for work or other goods trickles down to them. Contras and their families are occasionally treated free at the Friends of the Americas clinic. In 1984, Mario Calero, a representative of the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, FDN Contra Forces, and brother of FDN leader Adolfo Calero, said on the TV program, "There are a lot of people who support us. One support that I'm especially fond of is support given us by Friends of the Americas." Woody Jenkins released a statement to the press that him having daily contact with Oliver North was a quote-unquote bold-faced lie. Although I consider him a friend, I have only a rare conversation with Oliver North and knowing about the Iran-Contra affair. It's so interesting. You rarely have a conversation with North, but we're friends, but when you do, we rarely talk about Iran-Contra. Okay. CNP member Major General John K. Singlaub claimed that he obtained $100,000 from fellow members of the CNP during meetings for the Contra resistance. And so there's more information. It goes into about AmeriCares. AmeriCares Foundation is a nonprofit disaster relief and global health organization started in 1979 by Robert McCauley. McCauley learned about the United States jet carrying 243 Vietnamese orphans during Operation Baby Lift, initiated by Senator and author of the Franklin Scandal, John DeCamp. Crashed, and a third of the orphans were tragically killed. McCauley heard that, and it would take at least 10 days for the wounded to receive rescue, so he mortgaged his home to charter a Boeing 747 to rescue the orphans, which he did, and in 48 hours they were brought to California. Pope John Paul then asked Macaulay to raise funds for people suffering under martial law in Poland in 1981, and in 1982 AmeriCares was founded in airlift medicine to Poland. Many interesting people were on the AmeriCares directory board, including Zbigniew Brzezinski, J. Peter Grace. Grace was first a CFR member, then became a CNP member. He's a shipping magnate and president of the American chapter of the Knights of Malta in 1991. Prescott S. Bush Jr., George H.W. Bush's brother, Knight of Malta. Barbara Bush was ambassador at large for AmeriCares, and William E. Simon, CNP member, Knight of Malta, Secretary of Treasury under Richard Nixon, chairman of the Nicaraguan Freedom Fund, and fundraising organization set up in 1985 by the Mooney Washington Times. And it talks about how they gave over $100,000 to newsprint. Pretty much AmeriCares was laundering money and food and supplies to the Contra freedom fighters through funds that they raise at the Council for National Policy. So what do you got to say to all that?
Well, I noticed you mentioned the name as Zbigniew Brzezinski being on the board of AmeriCares. Well, there's an overlap between this whole CNP crowd and the CFR trilateral style operatives. I noticed that. But something that's really interesting is just how under the radar all of this goes. It's like, I mean, there's limited investigations within Congress, but I mean, this is clearly events where you have these very nefarious foreign policy geopolitical schemes going on, and it's not the left that's leading these. It's clearly not. I mean, in this case, this is very much being pushed by a very right-wing milieu as far as who's leading the charge for this. Of course, they justify it by saying that we've got to fulfill the Monroe Doctrine and keep the communists that want to destroy our way of life out of our continent, out of our. So we got to keep them from having any type of influence and being able to get close to our shores. So that's how they justify doing this stuff, and they'll justify it by saying that. I think if you really were to try to push them on it, we're doing what the government won't do. And of course, now that Trump's in, it's good that we have a guy who will actually publicly pursue these things. And then one more thing that sticks out to me was this whole Iran-Contra thing during all of this, Oliver North. And you've talked about this before in your streams, and Jeremy and I have talked about this on the Antedote, was laid the foundation for what was known as Rex 84 martial law. And then a couple years ago, we had Alex Jones. By the way, this is another, where I'm going with this.
Yes.
This is another consequence of Alex Jones and no one within that circle with a similar voice ever really educating anybody on, the secret right, is that there was no knowledge of these types of operations within, say, the Alex Jones InfoWars circle. So Alex Jones, along with Mike Adams, was able to push to his audience the idea that, well, really, I was wrong about martial law. I was wrong about
that was just globalism and liberalism. Right. That was what that is.
He always would address that, as part of like the globalist conspiracy, Rex 84 martial law, though he'd never actually connect Oliver North to the bigger power entity behind him. But he would play that clip and he would reference that as, this is the globalist conspiracy in action. I think a lot while Bush was president, because W. Bush was still seen as like the enemy by that whole contingent at that time.
Yes.
Under a very limited hangout scope, but still, I mean, it was at least not what they're doing with Trump today, pushing him as like your greatest ally. But now the people who wanted to enact this martial law to enslave people to FEMA camps or whatnot, well, no, they're just trying to save us, and they're trying to stop the mass invasion that's going to come in. And who knows, maybe this Rex 84 martial law narrative will be revisited now with the whole Corona thing, and that Trump is the heroic president who's deep state's trying to destroy him with this coronavirus. I mean, we'll see.
We'll definitely see. So to go give a little bit of background, so with Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who was very propped up by the Korean CIA, their Central Intelligence Agency, he was a false preacher. He was a heretic. He said himself that he was the Messiah, that he was Jesus Christ, and that Jesus had failed his mission before he was quote-unquote executed on the cross, and that Moon was the new Messiah. So it's very interesting of a group of people like the Council for National Policy who say they believe in Judeo-Christian values. My argument would be primarily Christian, or values of what or the population of this country is mainly founded upon.
I mean, Jerry Falwell, Ralph Reed, among others. I think Tim LaHaye, they loved Sun Myung Moon.
Well, of course they all did, So instead of those Judeo-Christian, or what I would say the Christian values of the West, they now come forth and they're like, well, we love Reverend Sun Myung Moon. It's like, okay, well, the Reverend Sun Myung Moon isn't Jesus, all right? Jesus died 2,000 years ago. Like, come on, like what? So they show up and so Tim LaHaye gets money from the Unification Church. Some might be say maybe to start the CNP, like the $50,000 that he received. Jerry Falwell got a $2.5 billion from Moon, and that's what bailed out Liberty University. American Conference on Religious Movements, a Rockville, Maryland-based group that fights discrimination against new religions. The group is funded by the Church of Scientology, the Hare Krishna organization, as well by the Unificationists, who gave it $3,000 a month. Moon. I mean, the Moonies donated $1 million donation to George Bush's presidential library. It's very interesting that such a good Christian organization like the Council for National Policy would just venerate the Reverend Sun Myung Moon as the new Messiah who's come to fulfill the mission of God, which Christ was not able to do because he was executed and was not the Son of God that was crucified on the cross. Very interesting. That's all I got to say. Like,
hey, Falwell, I found a link talking about the money that the Moonies had given to Falwell and to causes affiliated with his university. Jerry Falwell assures in a quote that he would treat that money just like he'd treat money from the American atheists. There's nothing to it, but he'll cash it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Why not?
But, it's just obviously keeping... And that would also be a fault of the media, not maybe of this particular media source, Christianity Today, which, of course, is owned by the Graham family, or at least was, and now Christianity Today is said to be traitorous because it treasonous to Christianity because it actually condemned Trump in an editorial, but it might be a indictment upon the publication that published this particular article I was looking at from 1998, where Falwell was quoted as saying that he'd treat that money just like he treated from the American atheist. Maybe an outlet like that should have told its followers what the Moonies stood for and what all that money was possibly being used for, but it didn't.
And remember, more than a dozen lawmakers got together at a congressional reception for the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. Both Republicans and Democrats were both here, the CFR and the CMP.
Tom DeLay was, I believe Tom DeLay had a relationship with Moon, didn't he?
Yes. And so Moon declared himself the Messiah at this reception and said his teachings have helped Hitler and Stalin be reborn as new persons. And of course, you have Elijah Cummings, from Maryland, Baltimore area, good CFR member, praising Moon as the event of always standing up for what is right. So again, the right-left paradigm's bullcrap, people. I don't know how many times I could tell you this. It all connects at the top. And so they're all venerating Sun Myung Moon as their Messiah, which is very interesting enough because, again, the CFR, the globalists, all the satanic atheists, as the right likes to push them all to be. You expect that from them, right? But you don't expect it from the good Christian organization like the Council for National Policy, right? Well, you know what? None of them are, So it is what it is. I mean, when you really get down to it, it is what it is. So.
Yes.
But that's more on Sun Myung Moon. We'll go to the next. So then you got Ronald Reagan, while United States president, was either briefed on or went to at least 4 CMP meetings in Dallas, Texas, Palm Beach, Florida, Texas again. Reagan received a White House briefing from a CMP meeting September 15, 1986. Reagan also received Central American remarks from a CMP meeting in 1985. That's where he's getting some of his Central American foreign policy from.
Yep.
Reagan gave the speech at the CMP meeting while he was still president on May 6, 1988. I mean, come on, people. I mean, the CMP's just started in the 1980s, and it's already has that amount of power where Reagan's receiving his briefings about foreign policy from CMP meetings and is speaking at CMP meetings. I mean, and say they have no power, Jay Dyer, I mean, what do you got to say to Reagan and his involvement within the Council for National Policy, Greg? Anything?
Well, it's when you think about it's very obvious when you think of like the veneration of Reagan and the Reagan Revolution and the reverence that Reagan has to this day with conservatives as the epitomization of the conservative movement. I mean, it's quite obvious that Reagan was a direct consequence of the rise of this new right with the Council for National Policy and the moral majority, which was the coalition of evangelicals, mobilization of evangelicals, straight out of the Council for National Policy. I mean, with Jerry Falwell and I'm sure Tim LaHaye right at the very center of the formation of the moral majority. So I mean, when you're talking about Reagan and the great conservative, the Reagan Revolution, I mean, you're basically talking about this network, and of course, it goes back before that for 2 decades with Reagan being at the being one of the central figures in the era of the previous mobilization of the new right of the Barry Goldwater era. So, long term, you go back to that, and you go back to the rise of both of the JBS, but also the John Birch Society, but also the publication that was vilifying the JBS, at least publicly. That
The
being
National
Bill
Review.
Buckley, National Review, and of course the Yale-educated CIA veteran Bill Buckley. But their publications, both of them, regardless if you look at the JBS, you look at the National Review, they were pushing the same bigger overall goals. Just that National Review tried to be more respectable as opposed to the crazy conspiracy kooks that John Birch Society, kind of like now, whereas you've got Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA and Dr. Sebastian Gorka playing the more respectable conservatives as opposed to the conspiracy nuts at InfoWars. But I think it's the same dynamic. But longer term, Reagan very much was a key player in the first right wing revolution, which was the Goldwater movement. Reagan was a key out of that with his speech at the Republican convention, or his speech for Barry Goldwater, A Time for Choosing, that kind of propelled him onto the national stage as the governor of California. And then roughly 15, 20 years later, with the economic financial mobilization of the Hunts and of the Coors families and of familial dynasties like that and their various wealth and the power and influence it brings them, in bringing in the continuation of the conservative, of this right, the new right, with the creation of the Council for National Policy and the mobilizing of the evangelicals through the moral majority and the satellite networks out of that. And it becomes very obvious when people talk about the look back with all this fondness at the Reagan Revolution, that this is what they're talking about. It was that this was the era that brought together this what we're seeing now with the modern day conservative movement, the Council for National Policy and all the various offspringings of it, and the bringing together of the evangelicals and of the other aspects of this right wing into a more consolidated, closer knit group, rather than maybe more splintered in its earlier days. So that's what I think.
Yeah.
To sum up what I said there, I said a mouthful. Basically, the Reagan Revolution is the embodiment and the epitomization of the Council for National Policy in this new right-wing revolution.
And what you get with the Trump revolution, it's
Yes,
just a replay of Reagan. It's just same similar play.
Yes.
So I want to read the
Council for National Policy all over the center of the group that took over the Trump campaign, obviously through the Mercers and Steve Bannon.
Oh yes, I mean, go listen
David
if you guys
Bossie and
if you guys
once
haven't.
Again, CNP right at the center of it.
Oh yes, if you haven't listened to the Antedote's excellent breakdown from 11/9 to 9/11, or 9/11 to 11/9, should I say? George and I also did a stream showing the 9/11 connections as well, and kind of use that same title to give you guys props for all the excellent work that you guys have done with that. As kind of like an homage, I guess is the correct term for it. So I'm gonna read a little bit about Blackwell. So long-term.
This is Morton Blackwell, right?
No, John Kenneth Blackwell.
Oh, okay, great.
Long-term and current CNP member John Kenneth Blackwell, Prince Hall Mason, former mayor of Cincinnati, Ohio, and Ohio Secretary of State, allegedly helped rig the 2004 presidential election so George W. Bush would win Ohio and win enough electoral college votes to beat John Kerry. Blackwell went against the orders of the Ohio State Senator Jeff Jacobson to not use Diebold machines, touchscreen machines with no paper trail, for the upcoming 2004 election. Blackwell denied his order, and they were still used. On April 4, 2006, the Columbus Dispatch reported that Blackwell owned stocks 83 shares down from 178 shares purchased in January 2005 in Diebold, a voting machine and ATM manufacturer. At the same time, his office negotiated a deal with the company. This is from George from cavdev.org. Even before the 2004 election, Blackwell worked to stack the deck, applying absurdly strict interpretation of state law. They rejected voter registration forms unless they were printed on a very specific type of paper, a different type from the one the local election boards in Blackwell's own office were handing out. Those many new voters, who by most accounts largely would have gone against Bush, were not even allowed to register. For the election results reporting technology, Blackwell brought in a partisan IT contractors GovTech run by Mike Connell. Mike Connell was eventually assassinated on December 2008 in a plane crash before he would turn witness against Blackwell. And both Blackwell and Ken Starr have been implicated as being around that mysterious plane crash. These contractors established a man in the middle where, late on election night, election servers returned from individual countries stopped going directly to the Secretary of State's office and instead passed through SmartTech server in Chattanooga, Tennessee. or the votes could have been altered at will. Blackwell threatened to remove any election board officials who didn't comply with his orders, eventually putting local election offices under his control. In cases where hand counts still didn't match the official counts, Blackwell urged local officials to ignore the issues or sent in a widely distrusted private voting machine technician to fiddle with the machines until they did match. As a final parting gift, when Blackwell was sued in 2016 for his election misconduct over half a century, over half of the county election board began destroying ballots in violation of federal law and a court order. Of course, there's more to Blackwell and, of course, Ukraine that you guys have covered too as well, which I will be adding to this presentation. But yeah, John Kenneth Blackwell. One thing that I get from Ann Nelson's book Shadow Network is John Kenneth Blackwell has been a part of the CMP since almost its inception, and has been very important about the CMP as far as modernizing them and modern. You see a lot of CMP smoking heads on Twitter, like Al Alexander, and you're always wondering how the Republican Party can be so good with technology and the Democratic Party being so poor at it. And so a lot of that did come from good old John Kenneth Blackwell and his knowledge and spearheading those foundations. So.
Yeah, and you see the failure of the media once again to do its job, and that John Blackwell is is still. I mean, much less walking around as a free man. I mean, how much minimal at best actual coverage of anything serious that Blackwell has been involved in, which, I mean, it on one hand it amazes me, but on the other hand, when you look at just like the bigger overall networks and operations and how this and the left, globalist, whatever you want to call it, network ultimately play off of each other. I mean, I think it's very instructive for somebody like Ken Blackwell has not been adequately exposed as far as the things he's been involved in. And I mean, he can even still appear on networks like MSNBC as like the token conservative in a panel and not be exposed by anybody. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely, but it's pathetic. But it really gives you an indicator on the state of our quote unquote democracy. And of course, as you've talked about before, and as we've mentioned, Mike Pence's election, I think it was some type of election integrity board, pointed at Ken Blackwell for that investigation into all the alleged voter fraud and the dead votes that were going on in the 2016 election, which was supposedly the reason why Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. An investigation and ultimately didn't really find anything much, but Blackwell was on there, and I guarantee if something similar is being planned for 2020, Blackwell will be at the center of it. So,
yeah. A couple.
Also, one more thing about Blackwell is that, in addition to he's on the board of the Family Research Council.
Yes,
I kind of call it the triumvirate of Tony Perkins, Jerry Boykin, and Ken Blackwell. Those are three very important people to understand, I think. Also, Ken Blackwell is also a member of the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, JINSA. I believe it actually renamed itself the Jewish Institute for the National Security of America.
That's funny.
Just the last couple of years or so, but Ken Blackwell, through this as an example of this dominionist evangelical Zionist alliance, is on the board of JINSA and has written a lot of very hawkish editorials for JINSA. So
maybe we should read excerpts one stream from Rebuilding America: Prescription for Creating Strong Families, Building the Wealth of Working People, and Ending Welfare by John Kenneth Blackwell and Jerome Corsi.
Yes, Jerome
George
Corsi.
Webb tells me Jerome Corsi is the deep state's worst nightmare. So, I mean, maybe I shouldn't just lay off a CMP ardent Zionist Jerome Corsi because he's fighting the deep state.
Remember, Corsi was right at the forefront of the Swift Boat veterans scandal against John Kerry, which was part of the narrative that led to Bush's reelection. So once again, you see a full circle between the role of, say, Karl Rove, the role of Roger Stone, and then you bring in Jerome Corsi and Ken Blackwell. These are supposedly people who don't have the same goals in mind, but they all come together for these bigger type of operations.
And of course, we're not saying anything at all, Greg, that we wanted John Kerry to be elected over George W. Bush. They're both skull and bones, okay? We're not saying that at all. We're just saying, look, this was rigged and this is why it happened,
But
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, we're not rooting for Kerry, just like, wouldn't be rooting for, not rooting for, certainly the hell not rooting for Clinton by exposing that there was
No.
all kinds of
Shenanigans that was put forth by the same
globally going on
people.
lead up to the 2016 election.
Yes.
It wouldn't be cheerleading for Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden if the same thing takes place in the 2020 election. But I mean, it's
which
regardless
it is
of,
taking place. Bernie's getting screwed.
yeah, regardless of what is going on and who it's being used against. I mean, I feel like we have an obligation to be honest about this stuff. And I mean, it's very obvious that there have been some major scheming going on within the GOP and as far as getting Republican presidents elected in recent years.
Now, come on, Greg. I need you to say 2 words with me. Onward together. Okay?
Hashtag WWG1WGA.
So yeah, it's the 2 dichotomies.
So
I guess on the left you get onward
Yeah.
together. On the right you get where we go when we go all. I guess they're technically the same, right? One's for Clinton, one's for Trump. If you really look at it that way, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you know about Daniel O'Graham? I want to bring a brief thing about Daniel Graham before get kind of.
I'm not very familiar with Daniel
Okay,
Graham.
so Daniel Graham was Lieutenant General of the United States Army. He was a big part of what they call the High Frontier, so kinetic-based weapons. Rods from God. Graham was also a member of Unification Church-sponsored organizations, the American Freedom Coalition, a member of the World Anti-Communist League. So Graham, on the Reagan White House callboy scandal, when he was quoted by Paul Rodriguez from the Mooney Washington Times. However, Paul Rodriguez did a lot of good research into all these scandals and stuff like that, even though he worked for the Washington Times and was later, brushed off to the side and made out to seem nothing for trying to get the truth out. Graham said, "We have known for many, many years that that there is a department of the KGB whose job is to prey on sexual deviants." So, of course, the callboy scandal that occurred and the Franklin scandal that was a part of that occurred in the 1980s, it was the KGB boogeymen. Greg, it was not the Central Intelligence Agency, our own Central Intelligence Agency, being involved, or the CMP being involved with the Franklin scandal and the callboy scandal. It was strictly only the KGB.
Oh, of course. Maybe that would explain Roger Stone then. Who knows? LOL.
So, we need to do a separate, complete stream of you and I. I really, I guess on a tangent, really makes me upset and angry. When MAGA hat wearing people just seem like Roger Stone is being completely crucified, has never done anything wrong in his entire life or any crime, and should be completely exonerated of every crime that he's ever done. He's only been for us, the American citizens. It really makes me upset. It makes me sick to my stomach. What about you?
Yeah, but now currently, John, Roger Stone's going through an out-of-body experience because he recently gave his heart to the Lord. So.
Yeah, that's what they claim, but then again, I saw him in that Larry Kamen deposition, and it clearly looked like to me that Roger Stone was possessed by something. So I really don't know if he's given his heart to the Lord. Now, I can't say that he hasn't, and if he has, then God bless him. I hope he makes things right and comes out and
on his history, though,
becomes a whistleblower and admits to all of his previous sins, but I don't think that's going to happen. So
I will say, though, personally, for me, based on his history, who he's been involved with, and who's still propping him up to this day, everyone from Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson to Sean Hannity or Rush Limbaugh and everybody in between, I have my doubts.
I have my doubts too, but it's who for me to judge, though.
Or maybe it's a very different idea of what God is. Than,
maybe he's strengthened his pact with the devil, and is not confessing his sins to Jesus Christ and trying to make amends. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's not trying to live a Christian life and admit his
Well, it's kind of like
mistakes.
The people who tell us that Trump is more godly now since he's been elected, since he's had Paula White and all them placing hands on him.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, again, who am I to judge? Maybe Trump has changed his views and now believes that he should, when he prays to God, ask for forgiveness of his sins instead of just trying to quote-unquote make it right. But, is there anything else that you want to finish on, Greg, or anything? I definitely want to thank you for having me on, and I definitely want to have you on again in the immediate future. But the CMP is very important, and that, you and I both have mutual friends who also know about and discuss the CMP, And we have to ask these people that we come in contact with that may be seeing peers, like Adam Green, speaking to Harrison, for example.
Yes.
Like
I
Adam.
sent Adam your channel. I sent him a link to your playlist on the Council for National Policy. What he does with it is his decision, but I sent it to you.
Of course, and I greatly appreciate that. I wasn't even going to bring that up. But yeah, I hope that Adam does. Because, I mean, that is some of the biggest ammunition that we have against when Harrison goes, well, Alex Jones is beholden to no group. Oh, you sure about that, Harrison? You sure about that, bud? So, yeah. So hopefully something does. But any final thoughts? I'll let you have the floor for, 5 to 10 minutes. Any final thoughts? Anything else you can think of? Anything else you want to briefly cover?
I would just reiterate what we've been saying during this show and during other streams, that this is what was not filled in. These are the connections that needed to be made back when Alex Jones was doing his documentaries exposing globalism and running around with a microphone at the Bilderberg Group every year and shouting at passing by limousines that they probably have they probably have coffins of dead babies in their limousines and all that. And this is the other side of the pyramid that really needed to be exposed during that time period, much less now. And as a result of this never being properly exposed, we're seeing, I blame these people. This is one of the main reasons why we're in the situation we're in now, and why you've got so many people who should know better buying into and believing in, this charlatan in the White House, Donald Trump, and everything around it. The idea of drain the swamp to QAnon and all of the chicanery surrounding that, to the point that they can get people believing that that Brett Kavanaugh, the damn Supreme Court justice, all these people rallied around, from Q or not, that he's going to be the guy who's going to help Trump drain the swamp. And it was crucial to get him on because Lindsey Graham asked him about
now, Greg, I'm not going to let you slander. I'm not going to let you slander Lindsey Graham. Okay, he's doing excellent work, and they're all going to Guantanamo Bay. Okay, now how dare you?
Well, we can't question Guantanamo Bay either. We can't question the fact that false confessions for September 11th were carried out there, because these people would use Guantanamo Bay for the right reasons, much like Rex 84 martial law would have been a good thing.
Hillary Clinton's gonna, hey, John McCain didn't die and he's down there.
He's executed. So was Bush. Bush wasn't an old man who died of natural causes as a result of his old age.
Exactly, that's what Q told me. Trust the point.
So anyway, I digressed there, but I was getting into like how these people, rallied around, Brett Kavanaugh just being one example. But my bigger point, I digressed there a little bit. My bigger point is that the reason why people aren't able to see through these various, I think, things such as whether it's QAnon or whether it's just the more generic drain the swamp narrative, or whether it's just Trump is just a variation on the old America fighting the evil left Marxist, communist, socialist, terrorist complex that goes on the other side. It's because this has not been adequately exposed, and it is vital to speak honestly and as loudly as possible about this reality, because it is the key, I think, to what so many people who like to consider themselves woke and conspiracy oriented understand how the world really works. If you don't have an understanding of this network of the policy and all of the varying organizations and cells around it, then you don't really have an understanding of how the world works. And this is important to understand this as we get on closer and closer into this next election, and definitely the aftermath of it. And this is the direct result of people both in the mainstream and in the alternative media not doing their jobs. A lot of people who know about these facts, this information, just not getting this out to people, not getting the information they need. And that's why I think a large part of the reason why we're in the situation we're in, and why this information is of such vital importance to be exposed and put out there for people to understand.
Very much. I couldn't have said it better myself, Greg. I guess one final question is why don't you think anybody who previously worked for InfoWars has ever came out and been a whistleblower?
That's
I mean, I really do like the Dykes. They seem like they do great work. Don't get me wrong, but why hasn't You know, like none of them. I mean,
I
like
would like to hear.
Burma's downplayed it on Billy Ray Valentine's show that pretty much equated to believing the CMP was anti-Semitic. I'm gonna play that quip on here. I mean, he didn't directly
Burmese
come
was
out and
just
said that,
with
but
them. I believe
he
Burmese
hinted
and
at it.
Alex Jones. I believe Burmese and the InfoWars crew had a reunion of some sorts at that counter CPAC conference.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. Burmese is still,
As far as like, I'd love to hear the opinions of the Dykes, the Dykes, Aaron and Melissa, or I'd love to hear Kurt Nimmo or Wayne Madsen talk about the.
Wayne Madison. I respect Wayne in some degree, but I still think sometimes I have a question if he's a limited hangout or not.
I thought he was very weak in his exchange with Alex Jones, where he brought up the Katie Johnson.
Oh
lawsuit.
God, yes, I could have done a better job.
Him as a Soros operative.
Yeah, it made me sick.
I'd love to hear some of these whistleblowers, some of the former InfoWars employees, what they might know about it. I'd like to hear Alex Jones's ex-wife. Does she know anything about it? Because she's the person who's been on the record saying that Google actually helped promote Alex Jones.
Well, if anybody wants to reach out to me, who was the InfoWars? There's one that I think might be that left. Oh, I can't think of his name. The comic book writer, a comic book artist, I think. I can't remember who it was. I actually liked him. I'm bad with names. He was an African American.
I can't. Jabari Jackson.
Yes, Jackson. I'd love to interview him. I think he might know something. I think he might be willing to talk. But of course, when you have Harrison and Owen the Destroyer Schroyer, which Adam Green did so well, destroying him multiple times, it was ridiculous how much of an imbecile Owen Schroyer can be.
Owen Schroyer just he likes the cameras and he likes the spotlight and the attention.
Like Alex Jones. But yeah, they're going around saying, well, Alex Jones is beholden to no one, and he can get it. And what are all those money bombs Jones used to get? I mean, that's money laundering 101. You know, it's not that hard to figure that out. So it's silly when they say that to me.
And from the very beginning, I believe you could go back and look at a list of his sponsors from the very beginning, as far as the people who advertise on his channel for things like water filters and food and all that. These connections, I think, in a lot of ways went back to the same Council for National Policy networks.
Oh yes, and they used to have Joel Wallach on there. Alex Jones did a lot, and Joel Wallach props up many CMP people with longevity products.
Not to mention, of course, you and I have mentioned before, you can go on the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, and find InfoWars links from 1999. At the bottom of the page, you'll see WorldNet Daily and Drudge Report.
Joseph Fry and all those CMP people.
Yes. This was just after Drudge Report had made his name for himself, basically acting, I'd say, on behalf of State of Israel by exposing the Netanyahu, the Monica Lewinsky Clinton relationship to blackmail Clinton into being more harder on Iraq, among other things.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, and look, you and I, we're not making these arguments that none of these people are our guys, okay? Like, just because we harp on the CMP right now, you and I are not a fan of the CFR either. And just like those clips I played by Reeves from the Secret Right, they're both part of the CFR and CMP are both part of the world order, and they're both part. For example, 9/11. You know, 9/11 was a CFR CMP operation from the top down. There's no doubt about it. They were both involved. They were both involved with the Project of New American Century that I talked about with George when we did our from 9/11 to 11/9 stream. You know, the council. I mean. The Council for National Policy does have some CFR members in it, and probably vice versa. You know, so it's the Project for New American Century had CMP and CFRs in it. You know, so to say that these people aren't together, it's just silly. And to say that just because we harp on the CMP, I always get it all the time, and I'm pretty sure you do too. Well, you must be a liberal who loves Hillary Clinton, voted for Hillary Clinton, and you love her so very much. Why don't you marry her? You know, and I'm like, I detest.
I'm also, we're also delusional and stupid and dumb and must be on somebody's payroll. We should just go on. We would be great on CNN because we've criticized people on the left like Jimmy Dore for their takes on Russiagate being a nothing burger. By the way, a line given to CNN by Van Jones, CNN employee Van Jones to Project Veritas, and of course CNN having multiple, or Time Warner, parent company CNN, having two executives on the board of the Center for the National Interest, which drafted Trump's Russia policy, basically. So, but we're called that. Meanwhile, we'd probably be much less welcomed on CNN than the people who are doing the pseudo exposure of like this collusion being a nothing burger. So we get those accusations.
So one last thing, Greg. Let's discuss the new revelation that Eric Prince was infiltrating liberal groups and being up to no good. Kind of like that one primer piece that we got, was it from The Intercept a few years ago, about Oliver North wanting to get together with Eric Prince to kind of make a new spy ring for the Trump administration. Of course, they always talk about the spy rings that spied on Trump, the Owans and the Blackberries and stuff. Let's say there isn't some truth to that, okay? The CNP and CFR, maybe they're spying on each other, at least on the lower levels. So my question is so what about this new report that comes out about Eric Prince? You got it. You guys are gonna you guys probably could do a whole stream on the Antidote about this, right? I mean, or if I'm taking away your thunder, we don't have to discuss it.
No. I'm glad to discuss it. I mean, this would also fit into a bigger conversation that Jeremy and I want to have at some point about Lee Stranahan from Sputnik, the former protege of Andrew Breitbart, who, he's taken such a critical stance on Breitbart, but he continues to promote James O'Keefe as being a good friend and a great patriot and all that stuff. So it might fit into that. But as far as into that conversation, but I don't mind speaking about it now. But as far as Project Veritas and O'Keefe and Eric Prince go, I mean, this is just another example to take anything that you ever see from Project Veritas with the major grain of salt, because at the very worst, it's just going to be flat out lies. And at the very least, it's going to be weaponized half-truths. I mean, that are just designed to make one side of the aisle look bad. And this seemed to be a primary tenet, goal of Andrew Breitbart, who helped put him and James O'Keefe kind of got on the map at the same time with their quote-unquote exposures of Acorn, the supposed radical group that was involved with the Obama administration, and then also Van Jones, who they outed as a 9/11 truther right about the same time that Glenn Beck was going after Van Jones for that reason. And by the way, Van Jones's 9/11 truth was very light, to say the least, very milquetoast. But I digress. And I mean, goes into that bigger goal of the fight against the left, the enemy. Everything they do is just designed to make one side of the political aisle look bad. And I mean, that's everything you see from them. And if Eric Prince is involved in what Eric Prince's groups have been known to do overseas, and certainly even Eric Prince talking about on various interviews. He did one with Breitbart Radio. He did another one with Stefan Molyneux of Free Domain Radio, and he did one, I think, with Cassandra Fairbanks, the ex-Sanders fan turned Gateway pundit mouthpiece, about a new Phoenix program in America, basically a domestic version of the Vietnam era operation, the Phoenix program, and it creates a possibly much more sinister picture of what Project Veritas is up to, other than just, getting fake limited hangout exposures of various Democrats saying mean things about America or whatnot. I mean, it creates a more sinister picture. If Prince is involved, it might be worse than what we've suspected with something like Project.
Well, I mean, haven't you guys talked before that it was very interesting of how CNN would do hit pieces on Bernard Sanders at the same time the hit pieces on Project Veritas would come out? So is there a possibility that this is a connection between Eric Prince and all that too? Possibly?
I mean, it would make sense because, I mean, on that regard, that's an example of them going after the same, maybe the same enemy, so to speak. I mean, CNN comes out with this weaponized narrative of Sanders being a misogynist, saying, oh, well, women can't be president, and then, being a misogynist, anti-Elizabeth Warren, all that at the same time, within hours of Project Veritas exposing that, Bernie Sanders' staffer says that we're going to burn the city down and burn the country down if he doesn't get elected. I would say I don't know the exact ties, but I mean, at a bigger level, I think something like that would make sense, but I think there would have to be some I think there would have to be some, there has to be more information put out before I would go on the record and assert that there's like a continuum there at some level. I think that it's possible.
I think I'm just putting forth a hypothesis.
Sure, I
I'm
understand.
just saying
And I would even look at something like Van Jones telling Project Veritas that Russiagate or collusion, bigger collusion narrative as far as what did and didn't happen in 2016 is a big nothing burger. I might look at that as an example of something like that, such a weaponized quote being given to a group like that. But I think it's definitely possible. It's something to consider.
And you guys, of course, reading from Seth Abramson's Proof of Conspiracy, also talking about the Intercept report from December 2017 about Eric Prince and Oliver North and John R. McGuire, who was a Trump transition official who's now working for the intelligence contractor Aminitor Group. So it's very interesting that all of them are kind of all together in that nexus. And then you have Eric Prince, more reports of him priming and paying Project Veritas and releasing that. And James O'Keefe has spoken and had many panels and many CMP meetings. And I would assume he's a member. I don't know, but I would assume. And also Nelson kind of makes that assumption on the Shadow Network. So
he's definitely got the connections, even if he's not directly a member. I mean, my God, the guy who's, recruiting spies for his organization is a direct relative of one of the founding families of the CNP. So I mean,
of course, and they're using the code name Liberty U for their operative. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, it's just they're all these are all people don't want to realize it or not. And I've actually saw people on Twitter praising Eric Prince over this.
And one more scary thing. I mean, with one more possibility with the possible worst of what we're considering with the Trump administration and this ramped up rhetoric. I mean, honestly, it's coming from both sides. But right now we're focused on the right side because of the topic we're talking about here. But when you consider that the Trump has the keys and all of his people, and you even things. And you consider the worst possible consequences scenarios of under Trump administration, these type of undercover sting operations to catch people on mic saying bad things or being involved in getting all these bad quotes from people and other stuff. I mean, this could very well be used as a front for very heavy-handed tactics to be used as far as a President Trump and the patriots around him. I'm sure Q would be all for this.
Oh, yeah, so the White Hats trust the plan?
Yes, using the power of their positions to really take serious action against people on the other side of the aisle. I mean, this is the type of stuff that's going to justify it. Like, for example, this is one example. For example, if the nomination's stolen from Bernie Sanders, we have some type of 1968 Chicago Democratic National Convention style events take place in Milwaukee, people are going to go back to that. See, we told you.
I need you to say "Onward Together" for me, Greg. I need you to say it. Are you ready to say it yet?
Onward together with the truth that we're telling they were right all along, and look at these damn radical commies, when most likely what you and I both know is going to happen. If anything like that happens, it'll be a few paid agent provocateurs out causing violence being blamed on a mass group of people.
So now we're going to have, now I thought it was Mike Bloomberg, but Bloomberg's out now. So I think it may be creepy Joe Biden, Uncle Joe. He gets Hillary Clinton for his vice president. Okay, now a lot of people are saying it's going to be, I can't think of her name.
Oh, the governor, Georgia, Stacey Abrams?
Yeah, Stacey Abrams, thank you. But I think it's going to be Hillary Clinton, and then Joe is going to, he's going to have some sort of fugue state or something, and be like, I got dementia, I got to step down, and then it's Hillary Clinton.
It'll be the Hillary Clinton's alleged health problems in 2016 turned up to 100.
Or just we'll be at the broker convention, they're just going to outright in the second, Hillary Clinton's going to be there, and she's going to be like, well, something's got to be done, And I'm not saying Comrade Bernie is, our guy, all right? But I will say with Bernie, you would at least get maybe a small pushback, a very micro pushback on Israel. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Oh,
all
yeah.
I'm saying. Maybe a
I would say that if anybody's genuinely horrified, seems to be genuinely horrified by Sanders, it's definitely the Israel lobby. Which is ironic because, he would be the first openly Jewish, obviously, ethnically Jewish American president to be elected. And all the talk you hear of Trump being against them, it's like Israel lobby never, ever came out against Trump. And certainly not even to the level that they're coming out against Sanders now. But I mean,
yeah.
I don't know about Hillary. I mean, I've heard people float Michelle Obama's name out there
No,
too.
Hillary's way more likely, in my opinion.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see.
Way more likely. All right, is there anything else you could think of? I definitely want to have you on, Greg. And I actually, whenever you're ready, I think if you still want me to come on and kind of give
Oh
a
yeah, we
breakdown
definitely need to do an antidote stream with you. I want to do that in the near future. I'll be in touch about that. And we'll get that done sooner than later.
break down about dominionism and
Yes.
and the co-option of the Christian right, which the CMP was very much a part of, to push it to more of a pro-Zionist rhetoric that goes back from the Schofield Bible, that the Jews are God's chosen people, and completely forgetting the new covenant that came from Christianity.
Right, exactly.
Of course, 144,000 Jewish people will be saved according to the Book of Revelation, but it's very interesting. Of now, even when I was taught in, growing up in Presbyterian church that I went to, that I was very pro-Zionist growing up. I loved Sean Hannity. He was a great American and loved Israel, and again, it's not, as Jeremy being Jewish himself, you and I aren't, angry at the Jewish people and of themselves in Israel. It's the Jewish government on both sides in and of itself, just like it is here.
And that's one of the constant uphill battles you'll face within like the alt media within this milieu of research, because you do have and it was something we talked about in our last stream, that you do a lot of the areas that you are inevitably going to go in the direction of. I mean, in a lot of cases, is you're going to go down the it's just the Jews. Let's blame the Jews for everything, and that has to be, that's something that you're inevitably going to deal with within these circles. So it's something to definitely, it's a sensitive topic, but it's a topic that needs to be addressed. I mean, Jeremy and I try to address it. And with you, I'll say this with you, John, is that I'm glad to really have somebody come at this whole perspective of the right wing, and who can come at it from a Christian perspective, but still come at it with credibility, and there's not, and I mean this as a compliment to you. There's not a lot of people who come at it from there, because a lot of cases will be this weaponized Christianity, or else you could have true believers who may not be inclined to take things in the right direction when it comes to religion. And so I'm glad that you're out there and I am looking forward to having that conversation with you, because I feel like you bring a lot of credibility to addressing this from a perspective where there's not nearly enough addressing of it in a credible manner. So
no, not for me. I mean, George says the same thing to me. I myself am many of my beliefs would be conservative, as far as my political beliefs are concerned, and I am very strong in my Christian faith. So, and so but I'm not. I'm going to call out when the Dominionists are doing things that, in the New Apostolic Movement or Reformation or whatever. Of how I believe they're co-opting the truth of Christianity and using it for their own nefarious purposes, and it makes me sick to my stomach. I'm not going to back them up.
Yeah, and one more thing they do, and we'll talk about this more in depth, I think, when you come on the Antidote, is that these dominionists, these operatives who are pushing this particular strain of false theology, it's this combination of like this end times apocalyptic. Everything that happens in the world is God's judgment coming down on the world, and we must prepare. And then and you mix that in with the prosperity gospel. God just wants you to
live your best life now.
Material wealth, yes. And combination of that's the kind of stuff that's used to make Christians and believers look like just a bunch of crazy loony nutcases. And I think that's more or less done by design. They're put out there as the faces of Christianity, of evangelical Christianity, as a means to discredit. And I think that's something that you can see more and more as you look at this. But it's a combination of using that to just make fun of Christians and try to discredit them, but at the same time, also you see the other side of this picture, being complicit in covering up their true motivations and goals by not actually exposing what they're about.
Yes, that they're more in line with the Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Satanism than they are actually with
It's not
Christianity.
just it's not just these backwards, crazy, kooky lunatics. No, these are very, very sophisticated operatives that are pushing this stuff. They know what they're doing.
Oh yeah, you can't tell me Jim Baker doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, come on now. With him building the new he needs money for his new Hall of the Apostles, which include the old apostles and the new apostles for the new apostolic reformation. I'm very confident in my beliefs to say that there have been no new apostles since Jesus Christ's time. Okay, I'm very confident in that.
And anytime, and I would say this for Christians, I think you should be concerned anytime you have men saying that anytime you have humans saying that human beings need to take dominion over the earth, shouldn't that be a major red flag?
Or God, or them, holding many disciples of Q or MAGA hat people where they realize it or not, hold Trump as the God Emperor. Instead of believing that, like all men, he is not infallible, and he is fallible, and he will make mistakes, and he will let people down, and everything. Even the men that were righteously ordained by God, and I'm not saying Trump is in the slightest form, but if we're saying King David, for example, David did some pretty bad things too. He sinned, but he was still a man.
For Trump is that God raised King David, and he could raise Trump in his image too.
A little bit difference between Trump and King David, in my opinion, because King David was still humbled and believed in God and had faith, and because of that, he was. A man of God, God's own eye, so, there's a big difference between King David, in my opinion, a big difference between King David and
just
Donald
citing
Trump.
The comparison they make.
yeah, and so that's one of the major problems, and that's why I'm glad, that you guys are doing such excellent work over there in the Antedote, and Jeremy actually gives a good perspective, the Jewish perspective of also being an anti-Zionist, because as so many people in this profession, they think that every Jewish person is part of some grand Jewish conspiracy. The family down the street that goes to synagogue. It's the same thing I say with the people who put forth Jesuits. I say that every, person within the Catholic Church are part of some papist Jesuit conspiracy. What about one of my good friend's mother who goes to Catholic Mass? Like, I seriously doubt. Or even some of the local fathers. Odds are there has to be some good ones, right? So it's the same, with the people. Once you label one conspiracy and not try to look at all sides of the conspiracy, there's a problem, in my opinion. And not to say that there are some powerful Zionists or Jesuit or Knight of Malta factions at the top. I'm not denying that at all. Or even Swiss. Switzerland plays a large part in the world order. Look at the Geneva Convention, for example. It is what it is. But that's my biggest problem with all this is the polarization. Everybody's always at their throats, and everyone's always to say, well, it's this top fit person at the head of the snake, and it's not a collected group going up to the very top.
And it's always about it always has to be, you always have to have your enemy, and it always has to be you versus an enemy, and everybody wants to play the victim, and I think a large part of this is that so many of these weaponized narratives, whether it comes from the right or the left, because this is a problem with a lot of the left too, with this idea of white people are white people in capitalism are to blame for all the problems in the world. It goes on the other side too. It's the dehumanizing of your enemies, real and perceived. And I think anytime you get into dehumanization of other human beings, that's a very dangerous road to go down. But you're seeing that the biggest epitomization I would see of that right now is happening within this Trump milieu, where you have the literal dehumanization of your enemies as any type of criticism of the president or of what's going on around him is because you're just a loony liberal, and you're either that or you're shilling for literal Satanists who sacrifice children.
Well, it doesn't. There's a polarization of it where a person that's on the left, okay, for example. Hold on, a person on the left, they weaponize, because it happens in both ways. So on the right, you have weaponization where if you go against Trump or go against the CNP or anything like that, you love Hillary Clinton and you want to eat babies, okay? And then if it's on the left, a lot of the radicalization that happened from that was them going after white people, making them the most evilest thing on the planet, you know?
Yes.
And that made a lot of people who previously were not racist beforehand join the white nationalist movement because they're like, in for a penny, in for a pound. You know, you call me racist, well, I might as well be, because you're screwing me over, especially white males. You know, white males become extremely marginalized, and in doing so, that ends up causing a severe backlash.
Yeah.
So that was weaponization pushed from the left onto the right, and that made a lot of people get behind Trump. It made a lot of people get behind Richard Spencer, and all these these controlled white nationalist type groups, or go to David Duke, or go to Stormfront.
Yes.
And radicalize them because they felt like there was nowhere else for them to go. And that happened, and so the left is very much guilty of that, just as the right is guilty of doing the same thing almost to the left in a lot of ways and triggering them. So it makes the divide go further. Is that what you're trying to say, Greg? Without me putting words in your mouth?
No. I'm glad you did. I think you summarized it. I think you summarized it pretty well, and that what it does result in is a dehumanization of the other side. Whereas, you know, nothing that comes from, quote, the other side can be taken seriously, because it's either a bunch of misogynistic, racist supremacists saying it, or else it's just a bunch of loony liberal commie baby killing Satanists saying it. So it's the way that stupid.
I don't know. What are you thinking about the Clintons? What do you think about the Clintons? Maybe, but then again, you got to think about, well, if you think about the Clintons, and you got to think about Lawrence C. King, you know. So
but if you say, well, the Clintons, I think some of the narrative with the Clintons, has been weaponized too.
Of course.
But I think though, but anybody who has criticism from a liberal perspective, in a lot of cases, a much more principled perspective than, say, like the Clinton DNC establishment criticism of Trump is, or of the right-wing policies, then you're automatically lumped in with that. Go watch these stupid, some of these stupid man on the street videos with Owen Schroyer. Boy, I'd love to be on the street with him and have him put a microphone in my face. But it's just all about making the lefties look dumb and look like they're satanically possessed. And it's so weaponized. They don't always use those exact terms. It's all about making them look stupid and you
had Millie Weaver come out as pretty much as a Q pusher, you know.
Color me shocked, a Q pusher within InfoWars. Alex Jones never actually turned on Q and only created the facade of it because they were starting to out his employees.
Now, Greg, that would never happen. Now, come on.
Shocker.
Yeah, but she came out because it was trending on Twitter. Asked the question about Q, and she was. She pretty much. She didn't come out and say, I am a Q supporter, but she sure enough, wagged it out there that she was.
Another one who, like Owen Schroyer, I guess, just likes the attention and all that.
Yeah, and of course, nothing makes me sicker when all these MAGA hat wearing people love Bill Barr, and when you have the amazing Polly push it up there that William Barr is, he is a very strong Christian.
I'm looking at the tweet now.
Upstanding on his values, Greg. It's just
I'm looking at this Millie Weaver tweet now. Hugh is Q, the deep state's worst enemy.
Yeah, I thought Jerome Corsi was the deep state's worst nightmare. My bad. I'm guessing I'm getting a little bit confused here.
Both.
Nightmares. I had one more thing. I know we can go on forever, but there's
I can talk forever.
There's one more thing that I wanted to bring up as far as I'm gonna start calling it info whores, and I'm pretty sure I'm stealing that from somebody.
Yeah, that's okay.
What was it? I can't think. I don't know. It was something you were talking about InfoWars and talking about people pushing certain narratives. I can't remember.
Earlier in the show.
David Knight had someone on recently. Man, I wish I could remember who it was. That made me go, really, David? I'm not saying that David's our guy in the slightest bit, even though I do. there is something about David where I do like his
I
personality.
could see David Knight being a true believer at some level, like a long time in the game, as like a long time libertarian who truly believes in
that
his
he.
causes. Although I don't see how you can be at InfoWars for that long and still like believe in their mission, but whatever. I guess it's possible.
I will say with David Knight, I guess what I'm getting around to saying is I don't distaste him as much as I distaste
But as
Alex
my
Jones
friend
at this
also
point.
said, though, that David Knight might be old enough to know better too. So I don't know.
That is true, and I'm not saying David Knight's our guy in the slightest bit. I'm just saying out of the InfoWars team, I dislike him.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
least.
I would. Yeah, I would listen to him before I would like Owen Schroyer, because at least there will be some principled critiques of things from David Knight.
Man, or someone, I guess I can't remember. But Paul Joseph Watson, man, he's gone completely. Just well, I hope we do get that. I hope we do get
And
that.
I think Watson's been trash for a long time. I hear you though.
I hope we do get.
Watson once called Michael Savage an oily neocon. Throw that in his face.
I hope we do get the whole Roger Stone testimony, as I think that we may. Because me and you will play it on this channel, and we will give a critique, and we will laugh. Because Roger Stone looks like he definitely. I'm telling you, man, he is possessed by something. It ain't just desperation. It's either he is possessed by some sort of demon, or he is just bat crap insane. All right, that little clip was. I've never seen anything like it. I'm
laughing now, but it's probably not a laughing matter. But
no, you're allowed to laugh. I laughed at it too when I saw it. I was just like, "Whoa, this is." I don't think I've ever seen anything like this.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
maybe some people genuinely may not know how to react to it. Like maybe even Alex Jones genuinely doesn't know how to react to it. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe.
Could just be a big act too. I mean, who the hell knows?
Alex Jones is breaking away from Trump so much over the coronavirus thing, though. Interestingly enough.
But he's still wrapping it in this bigger narrative of the deep states trying to use it to destroy him too.
Now I will say this, and this is the last thing I promise, because I know you gotta go say it.
Oh, okay, go for it.
I do find it very interesting that if this is a quote-unquote bioweapon for the coronavirus, and I'm just speculating here, okay? Would you say colored me shock if Steve Bannon had something to do with this and the takedown of Chinese government and the takedown of the Iranian government and the takedown of globalism throughout the world? You know, because Italy rejected
very interesting
fascism again, more of the right wing, you know, with Bolsonaro and all the rest of them. So is it a possibility that Steve Bannon may have played a role in this, or am I giving him a little bit too much credit?
I mean, you might be giving him a little too much credit, but on the other hand, I mean, you know, Bannon and a number of other important influential operatives such as Frank Gaffney have been at the forefront of pushing this narrative that China is to blame for this, and that this could be the means to bring down like the CCP, the China.
That's what I'm saying. It seems
I know,
a little.
And I understand that there could be, you know, there's also some possible that Epoch Time. There's a network there with.
The Epoch Times with Falun Gong.
You've heard of the Committee for the Present Danger China, right? That's
yes.
Like it's the modern day iteration of the original Committee for the Present Danger, which was against the Soviet Union. Bannon and Gaffney and a number of others are on the board of that particular. I mean, you could be onto something. It is interesting that Iran just happens to become a primary victim of the coronavirus, to the point I believe the vice president, is that right?
He's ill. Yes, there's rumors that Khomeini is ill.
And then Italy and whatever's going on in the Italian-Chinese relationship, I mean, it's...
All I know is a little weird, okay? And I ain't saying that Bannon purposely did it, but this is a hypothesis. There
could be something with the bigger network going on there. I mean, it does seem to be conveniently... it's certainly, I mean, the conveniency of having Iran be afflicted with it, and maybe top leaders in Iran come down with it. I mean, that's rather convenient.
So people with the 4CP, the Committee on Career Present Data on China, you know, you're going to know a few of these names, okay? So you got Frank Gaffney, Steve Bannon, William Bennett, CNP member.
Yes, I know
CNP
William
member
Bennett.
Frank Gaffney, CNP member Steve Bannon, CNP member William Bennett, CNP member William G. Borkin, Paul Berkowitz, like come on, people. It's just CNP. Your favorite, Bob McEwen.
Oh yeah, Bob McEwen. There's somebody who He's probably the most fun. He's by far, I think, the most under the radar of all the people we've talked about today.
R. James Woolsey.
Oh, there's.
I
Yeah.
tell you what, things are getting done.
Yes, yes. Bob McEwen, though, has got to be the most under the radar of all the people we've talked about today. I mean, I could venture to guess that practically no one knows who Bob McEwen is.
No, I didn't
And
really.
I
Until we
had the
talked
privilege
about
of
it.
hearing him speak at Amway conferences. So
Yeah, I mean, he's out there
Back in the day.
giving the truth of the Lord. I mean,
Oh
it is
yeah,
what it is. So it seems like the CPD seems actually to be a combination of CFR and CMP at its finest together again,
yes,
just like
yeah,
the Project for New American Century. Imagine that.
yeah.
And
And
of course,
this is my last point I'll make is that
yes,
Jeremy and I we've talked about this on our show, and there's still some strange things going on with China where I can't quite understand it. Like you do have this China-Israel budding relationship in terms of trade, and even China taking over the port of Haifa in Israel, a key Israeli port, and you have this relationship where, much like with Russia and Israel, there's a lot of interesting dynamics going on with China and Israel, and a lot of these people
Belt and Road
that are
Initiative.
with this Committee for the Present Danger China, their favorite foreign country, of course, is Israel,
Oh,
and
why? Of
you have
course.
remember when that day spa scandal broke out that Robert Kraft was busted in. 20 miles from Mar-a-Lago, the founder of this day spa was photographed with all these conservative movement leaders. So there's some questions that still have to be answered regarding what the true nature of like this, anti-Chinese, all this rhetoric and a lot of this does take form into actual action and what it actually is going on there. Because there, once again, you see the strange bedfellows alliances or the strange bedfellows pop up in varying levels with all of this. So I mean, there's some questions need to be answered there.
Yes, and of course, Robert Kraft and Alan Dershowitz are very good friends, and supposedly there's many different interpretations of when Dershowitz meant Trump. Funny enough, and one of those is through Robert Kraft. So
Wouldn't surprise me. Remember, Dershowitz met. People want to go back to the old global conspiracy. Dershowitz met Epstein through. Wasn't it through a member of the Rothschild family?
yeah, was it Lindy Rothschild, if I remember?
I believe so. Lindy Rothschild. I want to say you're right on that.
But then again, there's many. Again, there's
Yeah, he met Epstein through his friend Lady Rothschild, the former Lynn Forrester.
Yes.
Right.
So I mean, Kraft is a bigger part of this nexus than people realize. I'm about 99% sure on that.
Hey, Kraft though, we can't criticize Kraft though because Kraft owns the Patriots, and the Patriots, I mean,
where we go when we go all.
Well, the Patriots represent a team of strong white men pushing back against the narratives that are in place. We can't criticize the Patriots, although Robert Kraft takes his players to IDF facilities, and Robert Kraft was also the award winner, the most recent winner of the Genesis Prize, which is an Israeli award, which was founded Mikhail Friedman, who's on the board of the Russian Alpha Bank. So there's another connection there for you.
Now, Greg, come on. Now the Patriots are God's given team to the United States of America, and Tom Brady's the best quarterback that ever lived, if you like your sports ball. And I
just find it ironic that these white nationalists, they like the Patriots, but it's ran by guys like the epitomization of everything they say they hate.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it is. It always turns out to be that way. You know what I mean? I mean, how many times you look into this stuff and
usually by design.
Yeah, it never disappoints, does it, Greg? I mean, there's very few times that you're looking into something and it doesn't pan out. I mean, that's how connected this nexus is. But tell everybody where they can find you, brother.
Yep, we're find us at the Antedote on YouTube. My Twitter account is Antedote Greg. It's ANTEDOTE, and you can find my co-host Jeremy on Twitter at JeremyWRK.
Try to push Jeremy to be on more on Twitter. We miss him, Greg. I know you're on there a little bit more. Try to get Jeremy to be on there a little more. Well, I've
started using it more, so.
Yeah, you have, and I definitely
pick on Lee Shanahan, but
yeah, maybe you should. Maybe and again with Lee, I don't dislike Lee as much as compared to other people like Alex Jones. I do think Lee. I do think he is very much controlled opposition and a voice for Russia.
I understand. I don't.
But you do know that I do think he does sometimes do good work. So
sure.
Like he did on the Indian reservation, sex trafficking and everything. So, but your criticism of Lee Stranahan is hopefully important, and I'm hoping that you are able to call more into fault lines. We've discussed Lee Stranahan on here. Go back to one of our previous, and hopefully Lee will answer. I know he knows about the CMP.
Oh, absolutely.
He has to know about the CMP, Greg.
And that's my thing with him, is that there's no way he's not at least somewhat aware of the bigger, Trump operation going on, and he still pushes this idea that, oh, Trump was against them and Trump is for the people and he's being used by people, and as if that's the depths of what's going on. It's not, and he knows more about it.
Yeah, but fault lines with, like we said about Nixon. Nixon kind of sometimes,
Yeah, right.
Gives a little bit of a different counter narrative, and I like Nixon.
Although he definitely he was when Lee was gone, he was kind of expressing himself a lot more. Jeremy's called him the Combs to Hannity, is kind of the guy who's there to be like the. It's interesting. As soon as Obama was elected, I believe Combs was out the door at Fox, so he'd like or wasn't on with Hannity anymore, so he'd like served his purpose of being like the punching bag during Bush years. So.
Very much.
Although
so.
He's now deceased, and I never heard any bad things about Combs, so I won't speak too ill.
I think Combs was controlled opposition to some degree, but I would say I've always heard that Alan Combs was a very personable person.
Sure.
That he used to interact with his audience on message boards and stuff like that, and seemed to. If you choose between me, he's even conservative. I could say this. Alan Combs is more of a stand-up guy than Sean Hannity is.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Unless someone has the documents and sends them to me and proves me otherwise, and I'll do a stream on how Alan Combs was the fuck. But right now, from what I've seen, it's not the case. Prove me wrong. I'm willing to look at it. All right. Take care, Greg. Glad to have you on, brother.
It's been fun, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too. Bye. All right, that's it for the stream. Greg is a dear friend of the show. I cannot tell you guys enough to go over to the Antedote YouTube channel, subscribe, and listen. Him and Jeremy do excellent work. These are people that I trust. I don't agree with them 100%, like I don't agree with everybody 100%. They don't agree with me 100%. But that still doesn't mean that I can't support the work, and I still can't say that. It still doesn't mean that I can't say that they're not genuine, because in my opinion, they are very much so. And I want to thank Greg again for coming on this channel, and Greg will come on hopefully again, because it's very good to break it down all this. So hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Thank you very much, everyone who joined us. God bless you. Until next time, always read the documents. Take care, everyone.